Let us begin with our topic of the day. How many of you have read about this topic earlier? American Revolution. पढ़ा है पहले कहीं? थोड़ा थोड़ा. Or you're totally unaware of the topic? How many of you know about the country called America? I am not asking in a very joking or jovial manner. I am serious about it. If you read American history books, for example, I a few years ago read a book called People's History of the United States of America by Howard Zinn. Now, when you say people's history, it means bottom-up subaltern view. It's a new kind of leftist idea which has become prominent after the fall of USSR. People's history. It was a fantastic book, no doubt. I read a decade ago. While reading the book, I understood that maybe that book is not for the international audience because lots of references were completely new to me. When you watch American movies, which I am sure most of you would be watching at least some of them sometimes, because Hollywood is like something that is overpowering. Like Netflix पे जाओ, you will hardly find series or hardly 10-20% series would be non-American. ठीक है, आजकल 2 साल में बहुत शुरू हुआ है, but नहीं होता है. So my point is that people presume in the West that what they know is something everybody knows. हाँ, यहीं पे मैसेच्यूसेट्स है, ये तो फिलाडेल्फिया, द सिटी ऑफ ब्रदरली लव, एवरीबडी नोस, उसमें क्या बड़ी बात है. सो आई वांटेड टू अंडरस्टैंड एट व्हाट लेवल शुड आई स्टार्ट. डू यू नो अबाउट देयर वाज समथिंग कॉल्ड एज न्यू वर्ल्ड व्हिच वाज डिस्कवर्ड बाय कोलंबस? ये तो कहानी पता है? नहीं पता. ओके. सी I'll do one very basic thing. I'll draw a timeline to give an idea of the overall thing. Then I will point out some important salient aspects of why are we studying this, and then let us directly go to questions first. Get a hold of what kind of topics, what kind of dimensions in which UPSC is interested, and then we'll start our topic. उससे थोड़ा सा basic clear हो जाएगा. So if you look at the timeline, we have 1490s when you have Columbus reaching there. He wanted to come to India, but he कैसे कहे, गलती से कहीं और पहुंच गया. पता है कि नहीं है? ऐसे चेहरा मार के बैठते हो ना, लगता है यार कुछ पता है. And he wanted to look for India. He went there somewhere in Caribbean, but that is not the beginning of America. Neither is that the discovery of America. दोनों तरफ आपको देखना है. Real discovery of America, now we know, had happened much before, a few centuries before, by Vikings. They had gone to Newfoundland, but Columbus got the credit for some reason. Let it be. But that also 1490s is also not the point जहाँ पे American colonization शुरू होता है. Because when we say America, what do you mean? You mean United States of America. But actually, technically, geographically, politically, it means entire American continent. North American continent, Mesoamerica, and South American continent, everywhere. It is America only. So see, this is kind of self-focused, self-congratulatory idea where you say America, you mean USA. क्योंकि यूएसए के खिलाफ मन में उनके अलावा बाकी सारे कोई है ही नहीं, वो सब सेकेंडरी, दे डोंट मैटर टू है. बट एनीवे, सो विल यू बी यूजिंग अमेरिका एज अ शॉर्ट चेंज फॉर यूएसए ओनली. बाकी कंट्रीज, कनाडा वाले नाराज हो जाए, हो जाने दो. ठीक है, मेक्सिको वाले नाराज हो जाए, हो जाने दो, वो भी अमेरिका ही है टेक्निकली. बट एनीवे, सो व्हेन आई से 1490s अमेरिका वाज डिस्कवर्ड, आई टेंड टू मीन अमेरिकन कॉन्टिनेंट वाज डिस्कवर्ड, नॉट अमेरिका एज अ नेशन. The real establishment of the colonies in North American continent started much later in the 17th century. The first British colony which was attempted to be established comes in 1610s, 1607 or 05 something. It is at a place called Jamestown. Now, this colony was attempted to be established, but it did not last. It was a very difficult affair to go to a new continent altogether by crossing entire Atlantic Ocean, settle into a new forest, and create a civilization. It's not a joke. It did not become self-sustainable. Ultimately, people deserted, many people died, it got lost. Couple of decades afterwards, in 1620s, you have another attempt, this time by Puritanicals, or rather, they were pilgrims. They came in a ship called Mayflower. It's a legendary story now in American folklore. City of Mayflower. आज भी वहाँ पे लोगों को मिलोगे तो there will be some white people in the northeast of America who will claim their descent directly from the pilgrims who came to US from the ship of Mayflower. वहाँ पे जो 200-400 लोग आए थे उनके हम वंशज हैं. उनको बड़ा गरूर होता है उस चीज का. And who were these puritanicals or pilgrims? They were people who wanted to follow a certain way of Christian religion, and they were feeling oppressed at that time in England. So it was a religious operation that led to some people who were हम अपना धर्म छोड़ेंगे नहीं भले देश छोड़ दे. So these are the people who wanted to pursue their religious idea and they wanted freedom to pursue. Religious freedom चाहिए, चाहे उसके लिए हम पूरा पृथ्वी यहाँ से आधी वहाँ न कर दे. And then they crossed the Atlantic Ocean. They went there, they settled there, and they started to create their settlements. It was a very arduous journey for them. It was not a joke. So the journey of America starts from actually Mayflower, because Jamestown did not last. It's in Virginia. Now our story, American story, story of American Revolution starts in 1760s. Immediately in the aftermath of something called as 7 Years' War. 7-year war was fought across the globe, English and French. Even in India, we study 7 Years' War. It was fought also in American continent. And after that, something happened which led to the beginning of the cycle which led to American independence movement, American Revolutionary War. And that ended by 1780s, 82, 83, etc. So from 1760s to 1780s. This is our syllabus. That's all. उस 20 साल में क्या हुआ? That is our syllabus in UPSC. We are actually technically not very much interested in what happened from 1620s to 1700s. 150 साल की परंपरा क्या है हमें लेना देना है नहीं. We are not interested, but we look at it in a very condensed manner as what was the outcome of that 150 years of struggle. So the people, when they started to claim that we want independence, they came from some background, certain context. हमें वो पता होना चाहिए. But my point is that this is Columbus. Then for 100 years nothing. You have this history of 150. No, India में उस समय क्या चल रहा है? It's the era of Mughal Empire. Generally 1607, 1605, Akbar passes away, right? So we have Mughal Empire going on at that time. So India is also entering early modern. Americans continent is just getting settled. By the time you come over here, they have settled on eastern coast in various places. They have formed something called as 13 colonies. 13 colonies, and each colony has a capital, has some more towns, lots of villages, and you have defined territory and boundary. And all these 13 colonies are on the eastern coast of America. They have not yet explored Central America. They have not yet gone to the western coast. Pacific to bahut dur ki baat hai. The story of American nation after the War of America is the story of the Wild West getting conquered. पूरा ईस्टर्न कोस्ट से वेस्टर्न कोस्ट जाना, रेलवे बनाना, गोल्ड रश, फाइंडिंग न्यू एग्रीकल्चर, एवरीथिंग, दैट स्टोरी कम्स after American Revolution. So when you talk of American Revolution, we perforce talk of the east of Appalachian Mountain, of the east of Mississippi River, only of the eastern coast. हम सेंटर और वेस्ट की बात कर ही नहीं रहे, वहाँ अमेरिका है ही नहीं. That you should be clear about. So if I actually want, I have a map somewhere here, right? So this is America. That is all. That's all. 13 colonies. We have Mississippi going from here. We have Appalachian Mountains, and we have all Indian area. ये कुछ नहीं है अमेरिका में. ये सब बाद में बनता है 19th सेंचुरी में, ठीक है. इट्स वाइल्ड वेस्ट. दैट वाइल्ड वेस्ट हैज अ डीप इम्पैक्ट ऑन द साइकी ऑफ अमेरिका. व्हेन यू गो इनटू अ न्यू कॉन्टिनेंट, यू फॉर्म सम काइंड ऑफ सेटलमेंट ओवर हियर. इस दिशा में जितना जाओ कम ही है. जंगल है, पहाड़ है, नदियां है, पानी है, खजाना है, मिनरल्स है, एनिमल्स है, जितना लूट सको लूटो. ताप यू आर लिमिटेड ओनली बाय योर ओन कैपेसिटी, नॉट बाय नेचर्स कैपेसिटी. You have abundance. America is a continent, has been a continent of abundance, cornucopia. It is very much unlike Europe. They don't have so many resources. Secondly, because you can suddenly do lots of efforts, you can suddenly find something new altogether. Over a night, you can get rich. Get rich by night. तो रात को गरीब था, सुबह एकदम अमीर बन गया. ये पॉसिबिलिटी नहीं, ये रियलिटी है अमेरिका में. If you do proper efforts, you get lucky. You do. It's an American dream to become rich, and that was also very much ingrained in it from very beginning. भाई मेहनत करो, क्यों नहीं आप अमीर होगे, दुनिया के सबसे अमीर बन जाओगे. Everybody has equal opportunity to become richest person in the world. That was again American dream, American belief in that. And then when you go gradually towards Wild West, it's not easy conquest. You have to fight wars with the people who actually reside there, the Red Indians or Native Americans. They have to be exterminated. You have to conquer the forest, kill lots of animals. It's a very dangerous thing, wild west. That also has become deeply ingrained in their psyche, that even today when they have reached western coast for over 100 years, even in their stories you will find those things. And now once the continent is over, उनके mental frontier mentality continues. नया frontier क्या है? चांद. नया क्या है? सूरज. नया क्या है? मार्स. Suddenly some extraterrestrial aliens will come and American state government will save the earth. हम दुनिया को बचाएंगे. आर्मागेडॉन. क्यों? ये मेंटालिटी कहाँ से आती है? दुनिया में कोई और कंट्री इतनी मूवी ऐसी नहीं बनाती कि हम पृथ्वी को बचाएंगे. अमेरिका ही क्यों बनाती है? ये वाइल्ड वेस्ट नोशन. It is ingrained in their mentality, and that mentality कि we will take hard work. Nobody is coming to help us. हमें खुद को खुद बचाना है. We are fiercely individualistic because we have come to this continent for our own freedom. हमें कोई रोक के दिखाए. What is rule of law? There is jungle. कोई कानून हम पे नहीं चाहिए. हम अपना कानून बनाएंगे खुद. And then we are abundant, we are rich. Getting rich is our destiny. हमारा भगवान भी भगवान, the God has given us this continent to get rich. So religious ideal, American dream get infused into each other. So all this mentality has a huge thing to play in shaping American mind. It also shaped the difference between the new world and the old world. Because ultimately these are all people from England and other parts of Europe who have come there, but their mentality got different. So when you have some ideas coming up in England or Europe, and when they transition to America, they change the shape. For example, this is a new society. लोग कहाँ कहाँ से नहीं आए. आयरलैंड से आए, इंग्लैंड से आए, नॉर्मंडी से आए, दुनिया भर से आए. So people come from different religious background. People come from different ethnicities, different languages. यहाँ आके कोई दिक्कत नहीं है. Everybody एक, सब एक समान. So idea of diversity, idea of pluralism is ingrained in American society from day one. It is very much unlike European society. एक भाषा, एक धर्म, एक ethnicity, एक country. That is a European idea, not American. Then you also have to understand that in Europe you have people who are bound by tradition, bound by norms, bound by custom. They have feudal society, they have dominance of church. In Europe वो सब है. In America कुछ नहीं. People are not bound by feudalism. There is no feudal aristocracy there. There is no nobility. सब लोग भाग के आए वहां पे. कहाँ की nobility कहाँ है? They don't even have king. From beginning they have to go for self government, because आप जंगल के बीचों बीच हो. खुद का गांव खुद बचाओगे तो सेल्फ गवर्नमेंट नहीं करोगे तो कैसे होगा? From the beginning you have the spirit of freedom. From the beginning you have self government. There is no nobility to fight with. There is no aristocracy to fight with. There is no king to fight with. So the enlightenment ideas, जो एंटी मोनार्की, एंटी फ्यूडलिज्म, एंटी चर्च थे, when these ideas go to America, they have to modify. because there is no monarchy, there is no church to fight with. But the spirit of enlightenment, like freedom, liberty, equality, rule of law, all these things retain their power. But they get modified, they become anti-parliament also, because they have seen the parliament itself, British parliament, which in England is a symbol of freedom. क्योंकि राजा से सत्ता खींच के लाए दुनिया में कहाँ पे, पार्लियामेंट के पास. तो पार्लियामेंट के पास सत्ता होना इज फॉर इंग्लिश पीपल लिबर्टी, freedom. But वही parliament, same parliament becomes oppressive in the case of America. So their idea is now how to control the parliament. We have separation of power, we have republicanism, we have president. These ideas become important. फर्क समझ में आ रहा है? ऐसे बैठे हो चेहरा चुप करके. Anyway, so the first point we have to start with is what was the nichod of this 150 years. By the time you reach the middle of 18th century, ये कौन लोग थे, वो थोड़ा समझ में आए. And then we'll go to causes and course and consequences. Let us look at the questions for a moment that UPSC has asked in the past. First question: the American Revolution was a natural and even expected event in the history of colonial people who had come of age. What is come of age? Not dark. Come of age, कोई लड़का या लड़की का जब एज कम ऑफ एज होती है, मतलब नाउ शी और ही हैज बिकम एडोलेसेंट. अब आपकी उम्र हो गई, अब आप मैच्योर हो गए, अब तक आप बच्चे थे. So from infant to adult, the transition is called as coming of age. So when you say come of age over here, it means the colonies, जो पहली बनती है बच्चे होते हैं, धीरे धीरे gradually these colonies become mature and they become adult. And once you become adult, तो बाप कोई सत्ता दिखा सकता है ना, बाप की भी नहीं सुनेगा आदमी. So when you say American colonies have come of age, मतलब the mother country, the metropole, London, English people now cannot control them. अब वो matured है. So ये कब पता चलेगा आपको? How would you know that? So here you will have to discuss about the nichod of those 150 years of history. By the time you come to 760s and British start to assert their power, these colonies don't listen. And why don't they listen? Because they have already become matured. So why American colonies had become matured is the question. And therefore they retaliated against any possibility of imposition of control and taxes from UK. So it's about the causes of American Revolution, long-term causes, not the immediate cause. Immediate causes would be some events that happened just before that. Question is not about that. Question is about the long-term causes of American Revolution. That is the very idea. Is it clear? The second question: no taxation without representation. Come on, this is the essence of the American Revolution. It's a main slogan of revolution. No taxation without representation. So that talks about the political ideal. The tax is okay. Multiple tax the British want to enforce, it is fine, provided we have a political say. Otherwise, we have our rights. So political participation, self-government is ingrained. So political enlightenment is the context over here. Again, you go to the cause of the revolution. Then you have the American Revolution was essentially an economic conflict between American capitalism and British mercantilism. Now, this question to be examined critically is a typical type of question that we will find both in the case of America and French Revolution and Russian Revolution and any other revolution like Chinese Revolution. Why? Whenever revolution happens, you have two types of causes. It's a template, समझ लो उसको. You have some causes which are material causes, economic context, and some causes which are ideological causes. So all the causes apart from events तो ठीक है होते रहते हैं, but if you think analytically, all the causes can be grouped into either material causes or ideological causes. Now nobody says कि बस एक सच है और दूसरा झूठ. No, every historian agrees that both of these sets or baskets of causes coexist. The question is something else. The question is which one is more fundamental and which one is just contributory and additional cause. कौन सा essential cause है, कौन सा supplementary cause है. If you are a Marxist or if you are a leftist who goes for economic determinism, you will focus more on the economic causes and then say कि भाई evolution तो होनी ही होनी थी, revolution तो होनी ही होनी थी. Ideas just shaped the direction, gave the articulation, or even supported it, etc. But ideas did not create the revolution in itself. It is created by material causes. And if you are focusing on intellectual history, you would say material तो है ही है, वो तो पहले से भी था. आज के दिन में ऐसा क्या आन पड़ा? What happened now that the revolution happened? Causes in material are old. So here you go for intellectual causes, enlightenment, thought leaders. So in our questions also, when you have critically analyzed, you have to, in the first half of the answer, focus on the mercantilism versus capitalism and justify, yes, economic basis is important. But you also go to second half, you discuss, no, there is basis of ideology also, enlightenment thought also, political institutional struggle also. The question can be reversed. The reverse way of question is not yet asked in the case of American Revolution by UPSC, but it has multiple times been asked in the case of French Revolution. The connection of philosophers with the revolution is remote and indirect. Discuss. यही तो बात हुई. Arguments remain the same. Examples keep changing. Examples keep changing. Formation of Indian nationalism in modern India. क्या है? What are the material causes and what are the ideological causes? Again, same thing. No difference. History में आप ये template समझ जाओ ना, points create करना बड़ा आसान हो जाता है. Just local facts keep varying from here to there. Then you go for American Revolution, seems to have come with remarkable suddenness. Remarkable suddenness. A roster of talented leaders emerged during 1763 to 1775 to make it happen. Here you have to talk about different leaders. Why suddenness? Compare that with India. In the case of India, how many decades we took to even understand the very nature of British colonization. We had to create the entire theory of drain of wealth. Then we had to propagate it amongst the people, newspapers, journals, thought leaders, reformers, revivalist people, then moderates, extremists, going from corner to corner. It took us about a century for Gandhi to arrive. From Raja Ram Mohan Roy to Mahatma Gandhi, एक सदी गई है, 100 years, just to awaken the people. In case of America, the moment they impose taxes, what is the timeline? Bas. That's all. So, till the 1760s, British people are not even taxing Americans seriously. Kahani of imposition of imposition of taxes starts in 1760s. जैसे शुरू होता है तुरंत रिस्पॉन्स आता है, नहीं चलेगा, नहीं चलेगा. Why? Because they are already aware, already matured, already enlightened, already educated. So within a remarkable suddenness is this 20 years. Why? Because of this long history before the commencement of the revolution. That is one aspect. And then we have second part of the question. A roster of talented leaders emerged during this to make it happen. So we have to talk about leadership. Here we just list different people. James Otis, Samuel Adams, Madison, Washington, Franklin. जो लिखना है लिखो. We'll see at least a dozen leaders today in our lecture. Just to talk about their contribution. Simple. If you go to next question, because the question is elucidate, कोई ज़्यादा सोचना नहीं है, बस explain करना, not analyze or critically analyze or examine. Do you understand that the lack of statesmanship in London during the 60s and 70s was an important contributory factor in the precipitation of American Revolution? Analyze. So what they are now saying in this question, the focus is on colony. What is happening in the colony? How they are developing, how they are shaping the discourse with the help of leaders. Now the question is reversed. The focus is on metropole. How the mistakes are being committed from London side. क्या वो कारणीभूत थे? Are those things responsible? So this is a dipole of question. On one side, what are the mistakes of English? On the other side, what is the initiative of Americans? Actually, if you understand today, if I just ask you to list the causes of American Revolution, आप दोनों लिखते. In the general studies answer वही करोगे आप. In GS, you just list cause 1, cause 2, cause 3, cause 4, cause 5, just 10 causes. You are writing 10, here in 15. अरे 15 लिख लिए. In optional, that is not the point. Adding more and more facts is not the point in optional. In optional, you have to get to the essence. The question is not how many causes you can remember. The question is cause A important or cause B important? That is being asked to you. अब दोनों में तुलना करो, which is more fundamental and which is more contributory, which is just supplementary. So this is the history writing that we have to understand. Here, for example, the focus is on economy. So if the next question will be asked, which will be a new question, in that case the focus will be on enlightenment, the political ideals of Americans, the role of ideas in the revolution, and not on, and then they would ask, critically analyze. At that time you will add these reasons also कि भाई देखो ideas तो ठीक है, economy भी कॉल है. So this is how questions come, very simple. And same templates applies to French Revolution and other revolutions. कनिष्क भाई, आप कॉफी पीते हो? नहीं पीते हो? कॉफी पीते हो? पीते ही नहीं हो. ये नहीं पीते मुझे पता था, आप भी नहीं पीते. चलो ठीक. So let us focus on causes first, then we'll go to nature and consequences as well. What you notice here is that we do not discuss the course of the revolution. Neither in revolution nor in World War I nor in World War II हम कहीं भी course of revolution नहीं पढ़ते, except in one case, French Revolution, because that is part of our syllabus. Otherwise, you look at every other revolution, every other process, हमें causes, nature, consequences, बस. हमें blow by blow कहानी नहीं सुननी World War I की, World War II, क्यों syllabus में है नहीं अपने. Although that is very interesting, it's not part of our syllabus. So come back to the very beginning. बंद हो गया यार. Okay. So let us start with the beginning, the long-term causes of American Revolution. ये बड़ा आसान है. Okay. So the American Revolution was an ideological and political revolution based on the principles of American Enlightenment and led to the independence of the 13 colonies from the British. It was the first successful struggle against colonialism. दुनिया में पहला कंट्री है which started to decolonize itself. But मजे की बात यह है कि it was mentally already decolonized. बाद में वॉर हुआ है. In case of many countries in 20th century, political independence तो मिल गया, mentally अभी तक नहीं मिला है. Decolonize. Okay. It opened the doors of the modern age for mankind, led to worldwide impact and transformed both America and Europe. It is the first written constitution. It is the first manifestation of the ideas of enlightenment in political sense. So it is very consequential. It actually inaugurated an era of revolutions. यहाँ से आगे शुरू होता है French Revolution, Irish Revolution, then 1820s, 1830s, 1848, lots of revolutions started to come after. So era of revolution is inaugurated by American Revolution. Era of national, first modern nation to be established. And not only that, there are lots of things there, we'll see gradually. John Adams, the second president of the United States, actually has said, second मतलब पहला कौन था? Who was the first president of the United States? George Washington. Lincoln was there during the time of Civil War. इसके 100 साल बाद. ठीक है. So George Washington, he was not only the military general in the Revolutionary War, अमेरिका के साइड से, he was the leader of army while fighting against British. That is his first important role. The second important role of George Washington is that he led the entire constitution making process. He got it ratified. So constitution making में भी वो leader था. And the third important part of it is he became the first president for 2 terms, 8 साल. And in those 8 years, he laid the foundation of the presidency. क्या काम होना चाहिए, rules क्या होने चाहिए, foreign policy क्या होनी चाहिए, all those things. ठीक है. उसके बाद then we have John Adams. the second president of the United States, declared that the history of American Revolution went back to 1620. Why 1620? Mayflower. Mayflower. When the first permanent settlement was established by the British at Jamestown. It should not be 16 Jamestown. Actually, ये थोड़ा सा गलत हो गया. It is something else. But anyway, I don't recall the exact name. After a minute analysis, we can say the differences between the Britain and America started in 1763. So from 1620s to 1763, 150 साल जो है, that's a story that we are not interested in, but we want to understand the essence of it. So let us look at the essence. And this essence is nothing but the long-term consequences of American Revolution. The first thing is, nature of American society was very different as compared to the European society. Ethnic and cultural diversity. As you have seen that America became American, culturally American, because of its nature, because of its geographical, social, religious, economic context. And that was that lots of things are mentioned over here, like it was a country of immigrants. Now immigrants come from different background. They are not tied to each other by some common bond कि हमारी जात एक है, हमारी भाषा एक है, कुछ नहीं. Then what are you bound with? Present danger and future optimism. भविष्य की बात शुरू से ही करेंगे, भूतकाल खत्म. That's a new world. New world का basis is that there is no history. You start from the blank slate, and it is a very big thing. A country starting without history, अपने आंखों के सामने. History has a huge baggage. To throw it off is not easy. And then who belong to different ethnic and cultural groups. Therefore, you have diversity and plurality from day one. Unlike European people, Americans were not bound by sense of common pedigree, rather through a common future dream. And then, as I said, they don't have feudalism or they don't have church. Why were these immigrants coming to America, by the way? Multiple reasons. Someone would be coming to US for religious freedom, as we saw in the case of pilgrims or puritanicals. They want to pursue the religious freedom is very important. Some are coming because they are deported. देश से निकाल दिया गया. क्यों निकाल दिया गया? कोई crime किया होगा, so criminals are there. Some of them coming because they are in the penal colony. मतलब it's a jail. अमेरिका, ऑस्ट्रेलिया, न्यूजीलैंड, अंडमान ये जेल थे कि अपने देश में कोई गुनाह किया है, चलो जेल में डालो. कहाँ सजा दे? वहां पे दूर में जंगल में जाकर रह जा. So it's a country founded by criminals. To a sense, to some extent, it's a country of criminals which became the greatest country in the world. To some extent, you have people who are fortune seeker, who want to overnight become rich. They want to risk. जैसे आज कोई सट्टा खेलता है, टिकट खरीदता है, क्यों? उनको ओवरनाइट कुछ होना है. सेम पीपल, वहां जाके सोना मिल जाएगा. So they are fortune seekers. People who are suffering hardships in their present country, for example during famine, etc. So those who want to escape the present worst economic existence, then go up into a new country कि भाग चले. So you have push factors and pull factors both, and people of various background come together. And when they come there, they do not have any help from the past, from their mother country. जो करना है खुद करना है, खुद के बलबूते पे पूरा नया देश बनाना है. It is not easy, and they did not get any help. That made them very individualistic. Self-help, अपनी मदद खुद करो. To such an extent, वहां पे बेटा भी बाप की मदद नहीं लेता है कि अब मैं 15 साल उम्र हो गई, मेरे पैसे मैं कमाऊं, खुद कमाऊंगा. आई गो टू कॉलेज, आई विल अर्न माई ओन ब्रेड, आई विल हैव माई ओन हाउस. 15, 16, 17 साल के बाद घर में रहना पेरेंट के साथ, मतलब आपकी इज्जत चली गई. When Obama was the president of United States, his daughter used to work in Magdi as a waitress. उसी समय क्यों? खुद के पैसे खुद कमाएगी. बाप के पैसे में लाचार थोड़ी हूं मैं पैसे कमा के अपनी पॉकेट मनी ले लूंगी, बाप से पैसे नहीं लूंगी. तो ये सेल्फ हेल्प की, तो दैट स्पिरिट इज देयर ऑलवेज. इट इज नॉट दैट इजी. एंड व्हेन आफ्टर पुटिंग लॉट्स ऑफ एफर्ट्स यू क्रिएट सम इकोनॉमी, यू क्रिएट सम प्रॉस्पेरिटी, फिर अंग्रेज आए बोले टैक्स दो. क्यों दोगे भाई टैक्स? आप I love my property more than my parents because खून लगाया मैंने, जान लगाई उसमें. Simple. So that Americanness is there, and then persistence and tenacity is another additional important aspect of Americanness. Have you read it? I don't know whether you read English literature or not. There is an author called Ernest Hemingway. You might have heard of Hemingway. सुना है? For Whom the Bell Tolls. So anyway, so Hemingway wrote a book, Old Man and the Sea. It's a very classic book in American literature. In Marathi, it's translated also, I think, by P.L. Deshpande. The story of that book, I'll tell you in a moment. It's the entire essence of the tenacity and perseverance of American nature. एक बूढ़ा आदमी, the old man, who is a fisherman, अपनी नौका लेके, he takes his boat, goes into ocean, that I will get something. He goes there for entire day, doesn't find anything. At the end of the day, he finds a big मछली, एक whale. अब बोट इतनी छोटी है, whale उतनी साइज की है. How can he kill whale? But उसमें काटा तो फंस गया. Now the whale is there, and the whale wants to pull the boat in some other direction. He would not let it go. अब whale को मैं छोड़ूंगा नहीं. For next entire day and night, he is just like बारिश, सूरज, कुछ नहीं, बूढ़ा आदमी पकड़ के बैठा है, whale नहीं छोड़ूंगा. He waits and waits and waits till the whale dies, and then he brings her back home. शाम को दूसरे दिन घर आता है, झोपड़ी में जाके सो जाता है. It's the story of the struggle of an old man to conquer the whale, conquer the nature, conquer the spirit, conquer the self. That is American spirit. Simple story. But that hardiness comes out of the story. And that is, if you understand that hardiness, entire story of American Revolution becomes logical to you. ठीक है? I am giving you more background थोड़ा सा आधे घंटे के लिए, but I think it is necessary. Otherwise लगता क्या है पता है? If you don't understand this context, you start reading the story. अमेरिकन तो साले स्मगलर्स है. अमेरिकन तो मतलब उपकार, अंग्रेज इतने उपकार कर रहे हैं, ये तो भाई एहसान फरामोश है. Then the entire story appears as if Americans are wrong, British are right. But if you understand the context, then you know कि भाई there is contextual reality. ठीक है? Next point is that American continent was a continent of abundance. There was no dearth of resources, and it provided such a large opportunity for enterprise that fate of a person could change overnight. Therefore, it encouraged optimism and individualistic consciousness, and they had strong faith in their own capability to improve their own condition of life. Is it clear? Explain to kar diya hai. And then we have westward exploration. No, in all this, they actually had complete lack of affection for British. In case of India, British generated that affection कि भाई we are modern, we are advanced. आप Indians, you are so backward in your entire history. You were always invaded and ruled by foreigners. In your entire history, you were never united. You have only caste and language differences. We will provide you modern technology. We will provide you unity. We will provide you progress. We will give you education. आपके धर्म में क्या रखा है? So in India, they created entire argument whereby they could control our minds very well. In America, that did not happen because from day one, Americans were completely disaffected from British. They had no love for Britain. Why? That is because lots of reasons. The bond of attachment between American people and British was very weak, even though 90% of the people living in America were actually of British origin. वहीं से तो आए थे primarily. Some of them, one of the reasons is that lots of time had passed. Somebody came in Mayflower, he came because of persecution. गुस्सा होकर मुझे वहां से निकाल दिया है, तो मैं वापस नहीं जाऊंगा. That could be one reason. Or even if there is some affection towards हमारा गांव, even in that case, after 3-4 generations, that goes away. अब मैं बम्बई का हो गया, मेरे परदादा बम्बई आए थे बिहार से, अब मैं वहाँ पे ना गाँव है ना मेरे रिश्तेदार है, क्या करूँ जाके? Same thing. So you have either time lapsed or the reason for the migration was very difficult for them, no love. Not only that, so these are the various reasons, and these migrants to America had struggled hard over generations to make their living and to develop them economically. And during this entire struggle of 150 years, they actually received no material help from British. So they were self-made people, and because of this, they had they had no love or affection for their motherland. Because of this lack of affection towards British, they were under no moral obligation to remain under British rule forever. So when the character of British rule came out in open, Americans opposed them very quickly. आप है कौन? Because there is no moral. आपने हमसे उपकार किए हैं, आपने हमें बड़ा किया, लालन पालन कुछ नहीं किया आपने, सब हमने किया है. It's like your father just giving birth to you and then going away. And when you are 25 years old, you establish your life, he would come back and say, "अब मेरी सेवा करो." भाई क्यों करे तेरी सेवा? And that is the context here. Then you have next point, how the colonies matured gradually. Through the experience of those 150 years, 13 colonies were formed, and then they had matured in every respect of life: political, administrative, social, economic, religious, cultural, everywhere. So by the middle of the 18th century, Americans had matured in all spheres of life. For example, political and administrative. They had their own legislatures. Now, when I say there are 13 colonies, understand this, these are different 13 colonies. They are not one nation. Every colony has a different legislature assembly. Every colony has its own governor. There is no common governor on them. There is no common political thing connecting each other. All of them are created by a charter given to them by London Parliament, independent of each other, but they coexist. So 13 अलग-अलग colonies है. It could have been a scenario जहाँ ये 13 अलग देश बनते. That was possible. In case of India, for example, Myanmar, Sri Lanka, Nepal, they were kept separate. Same thing is there. In case of, take example of South America. South America created independence, but it ultimately created multiple nations. But in case of America, rather than having these 13 different nations, they created one nation, United States. And the story of American independence is also the story of how these states are coming together into one. And it was not by default. The states had a very much idea of self-governance. Self-governance बस अमेरिका का नहीं है, अपना अपना वर्जीनिया का है, न्यूयॉर्क का है, मेरीलैंड का है. Self-governance उनका है, not American continent. So they are very jealous of their states' right. हम जो state है, हमारे rights are very important. Union कौन है ये? So they are so fiercely independent that they oppose not only London, they oppose their own union. And ये बात इतनी important है to understand that when the American independence war is over and they are drafting constitution, problem शुरू हो गया. हर state बोल रहे हमारे power. We don't want to give any extra power to the union. जो करना है करो. Not only that, individual versus government. Individual would say government becomes oppressive. We don't want to give any power to any government, भले state हो, center हो, London हो. How if अगर हम उनको tax power दे दे और कल जाके उसके आर्मी क्रिएट कर दे, पुलिस बनाए और हम पे हमला करे तो? So what do they have? Second Amendment, right to bear arms. हर आदमी के पास बंदूक का अधिकार है, हथियार. क्यों? Because they want to protect themselves against whom? Against the government. गवर्नमेंट आके अपने पुलिस लेके आए, दिखाए तो हमें पहले. Government should not be unjust. If the moment it becomes unjust, we have right to rebel. How can we conserve that right? By having the arms. So everybody will carry banduk, rifle, and we see the negative side of that also today. Excessively negative side, but it was in a different context that the right was first created. So my point is 13 colonies are also independent colonies, and each of them has a legislature which is created by the charter given to them by London. And not they have a governor also. In case of India, we have Bombay governor, Calcutta governor, Madras governor. Same wise, they also have governor in each colony. Governor is appointed by London, but he is almost meaningless. All the codes, all the legislatures, all the laws, etc. are local only, because British have no interest and no time. And this land is not so fertile from the beginning. Gradually, later it became economically important. But initially, जब शुरू हुआ तो ये बहुत मतलब this was a backward area. So they had political independence. Most of the political administrative responsibilities were handled by themselves. And then each colony and the newspaper published therein dealt with the colonial power in London and largely ignored other colonies. In one sense, these colonies were enjoying freedom not only from London but also from each other. Then we have socio-religious development. American society was stable without the social tensions that dominated the life of Europeans, that nobility. Then you have commercial revolution, rise of middle class, the three states. वो सब प्रॉब्लम यहाँ पे थे ही ना. एवरीबडीज चाहे जो कर लो. इफ यू इन योर ओन विलेज, आप अमेरिका में वर्जीनिया में हो, मेरीलैंड में हो, एंड इफ यू फाइंड सम प्रॉब्लम विद समबडी, ठीक है निकल लो, 5 किलोमीटर वहां जंगल है, अपना से रुला लो. ऑल लैंड इज एम्प्टी. इट्स एम्प्टी लैंड सिंड्रोम. इट्स एक्चुअली नॉट एम्प्टी, इट्स बाय रेड इंडियंस, बट उनको आप ह्यूमन मानते ही नहीं हो, राइट? तो जाके अपना गाँव नया बसा लो, क्या प्रॉब्लम है? पहाड़ के उस तरफ जाओ, सारा खाली जमीन है. So point is that you cannot, once you have such abundant resources and infinite land, then social tensions don't come, because any tension if rises, you just migrate, go away, full stop, नया बना लो. In Europe it is limited, land is limited, society has to function within that limited resources. तो टेंशन बढ़ते हैं. डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन की बात होती है, यहाँ पे तो क्रिएशन की बात होती है. Then educational development, Harvard, Yale, Princeton, all of them were established by 17th, 18th century. So the best of the universities, the many of the old Ivy Leagues come from this era. So they are already educationally developed. These universities start competing with Oxford and Cambridge very soon. Even before, तो already उनके पास अपने अपने universities है. Not only universities, you go to even newspapers. Your Boston Mirror, New York Gazette, etc. Lots of newspapers start circulating amongst each other. You have Benjamin Franklin. He is the grand old man. He is actually the Renaissance man of America. For his inventions also. Bifocal किसने शुरू किया? इसी ने शुरू किया. Bifocal का चश्मा आता है ना बूढ़े लोगों का. It is his invention. He is a scientific, rational person also. He was a postmaster general. What he did, he created entire basis of the postal system in American colonies, because of which the roads were connected to each other and the communication, transportation between the colonies became very easy. With that, the newspapers started to flow from colony to colony to colony. तो आस-पास की खबरें आना शुरू हो गया. And once you have a circulation of newspaper, you have a public sphere emerging. You have beginning of imagined community, that we all belong to one common something, one common community. So idea of unitedness starts emerging in 1730s, 1740s, 1750s because of the commercial revolution, because of the transportation revolution, because of the communication revolution between the colonies, and one major role is played by Benjamin Franklin. तो 13 कॉलोनी साथ में आना शुरू होता है. एंड न्यूज़पेपर्स का रोल क्या होता है? न्यूज़पेपर्स आर इंपॉर्टेंट फॉर आर्टिकुलेशन ऑफ द डिसेंट, रिप्रेजेंटिंग योरसेल्फ अगेंस्ट द गवर्नमेंट. तो न्यूज़पेपर्स का रोल जो इंडिया में पढ़ते हैं वही यहाँ पे भी है. विल सी दैट इन मॉडर्न इंडिया ऑल्सो इन डिटेल. The first great awakening. So we have the Christian Protestant revival also, that lots of Americans are infused with the religious ideal. ये हमारी manifest destiny है, खुदा ने हमें दिया हुआ है land to become rich, and this is what we'll do. So you have a religious identity also becoming very jagrat at that time, very much awakened. We have first awakening, second awakening, etc., where suddenly theological ideas become very prominent. So the first great awakening among the Protestants happened in 1730s, 40s, 50s, just before the revolution. And it is important, we'll see later. This religious awareness, religious awakening plays a very important role. कि भाई हम oppose, George III is the king, he is unjust, but why should we oppose him? Because it is our religious duty to oppose injustice. So that becomes additional motivation for people to act. It is a very powerful motivation. जब हमारे यहाँ भी in 19th century India, when the tribals and peasants oppose the government, what is something that brings them together? Like Munda revolt, we have Birsa Munda. बिरसा कहे एकजुट हो वो छोड़ो ये खामोशी, मछुआरे आओ दलित आओ आओ आदिवासी. So what is something that is bringing all people together? The religious idea. बिरसा भगवान, भगवान बिरसा. He is helping to articulate the grievances, ki what is the injustice being done with them. He is helping creation of utopia, Satyug aayega. A better world is there, religious idea of utopia to motivate people. He is telling people, I will protect you. If they fire bullets, the bullets before they pierce your body, they will become water. आपको कुछ नहीं होगा, मेरा आशीर्वाद है, मेरा कवच है, जाओ लड़ो. So motivation also comes. So grievances, mobilization, motivation, articulation, utopia, all of these ideas are given by religion in tribal. So even in case of Europe, in America, you see religion playing very important role in motivating people to fight against the British. ठीक है? And then there's a typical American culture had evolved which played an important role in creating the circumstances responsible for the outbreak of the revolution. So you have the socio-religious development of the colonies as well, and then importantly go for the economic development. Economically, it was the era of progress. From 1720s, 30s, 40s, 50s, you will see that there is commercial revolution, there is huge amount of prosperity. Agriculture, land like tobacco, wool, you have industry coming up in different parts of America. For example, if you go to the map of America, for example, कहाँ पे होता है? This is all you have right now. American colonies, इतना ही अमेरिका है. यहाँ पे this part is important for trade. This part is for industry. And this part is for agriculture. You have different types of developments of economy happening in different regions because of the geographic peculiarities. Nonetheless, all of these three are thriving and prosperous. Not only they are thriving, the local assemblies, क्योंकि वो ज़्यादा कुछ government चला ही नहीं रहे, they don't charge much of taxes. So compared to the old world, where you have more social problem, less resources, more fight, and whatever abundance you have, it is shared and taxed. यहाँ पे तो life is much better by 1750. 1750 में आते आते American colonies are giving more prosperity and better life and less taxation compared to in the old world. तो ये तो भाई बना दिया, 150 साल लगा दिए उन्होंने, 5-6 जनरेशंस, बट ऐसा लैंड बनाया ना देश में दुनिया में कभी हुआ था पहले, ना उसके बाद कभी होगा. मतलब दैट इज व्हाट दे बिलीव इन. हम नहीं मानते उसको, वो अलग बात है. So the level of economic progress in these American colonies was not less than Britain in any way. They were not dependent on outsider for economic prosperity. They were living a better life than most of the living British. Then you see, so इसमें हमने what all we have seen, economically, politically, administratively, socially, culturally, religiously, education wise, everywhere they are progressive, they are developed, they are sometimes even better than the old world. They have not one thing. एक चीज नहीं उनके पास. They don't have one thing where they lack. Army, defense capability. For that, they are dependent on England. British had kept huge army in America for defense of American colonies, because American continent was getting inhabited not only by British colonizers but other European countries as well. Like if you go to Canada, Quebec, the French colony. If you go to South, the Spanish colony. पता नहीं कब हमला कर दे. The battles, the wars that happen in the European continent get overflown into colonies also. When British and French fight in Europe, they also fight in India, they also fight in America. So just north of America, Canada is actually at that time a French colony. पता नहीं कब हमला. तो British colonies, 13 colonies are afraid that they need protection. And who will give them protection? British army. तो हम पे अब टैक्स मत लगाओ, हम पे जुल्म मत करो, हमसे कुछ मत लो, बट हमें फ्री में प्रोटेक्शन चाहिए. And British were willing to give that. So that is the funniest part. In case of India, they exploited India. There is ton of wealth away from India to London. In case of America, it is British who are spending money on American colonies. The ton of wealth happens the reverse way. America is spending money more in America. Sorry, Britons are spending more money in America than getting out of them. ऐसे क्यों? Firstly, it is a settler colony. All the white brothers. In case of us, we are brown and yellow people. एक तो racist idea आ जाती है. But more than that, holding America as their colonies was very prestigious in the global politics for Britain. If we have colonies in the east, in the west, America is our colony. So it provided British domestically and globally diplomatic and prestigious heft. तो वो चाहिए था उनको. उसके बदले in return of that, what did they give? ठीक है, हम आर्मी रखते हैं, आपका प्रोटेक्शन करते हैं. We have the right to execute all the taxes, all the laws, but समय कहाँ है, आप अपना करते रहो. We don't have time. So there was something called as a policy of salutary neglect. From 1620s to 1760s, British nominally, on paper, continued to have all the rights कि हम colonizer है, आप colony हो. But those were not implemented, those were not executed. And taking advantage of that vacuum of implementation of colonial policy, Americans prospered and prospered and prospered. And after 1760s, something will happen. British and French would go on war. युद्ध होगा. अब युद्ध का हम थोड़ा देखेंगे, लेकिन चलो we'll go there later on. But when this policy is revoked, उस समय Americans will rise in rebellion कि अब नहीं चलेगा. So in case of, for example, French, what happens is that French are creating revolution to oppose the status quo. They want change to happen. कि ये सब नहीं, old system, absolutist regime would not be allowed to continue. We want rights. We are rising now. Middle class has to have some say. Change the system. No more status quo. In case of America, they want this status quo to continue. The change that British tried to bring here for the first time. No more salutary neglect. Let us try to impose some taxes. American बोले no taxes. Go to status quo. So the revolution's purpose in itself was to maintain the status quo. थोड़ा सा इंटरेस्टिंग पर्सपेक्टिव है ये. ठीक है. Then you gradually see that because of newspaper, education, economic prosperity, interconnection, communication, transportation, etc., these colonies are gradually coming together. And the one example of that we have, one evidence of that we have of coming together of colonies is in the case of Albany Congress. So Albany Congress happens in New York, in which colonies come together and they advocated a union of the British colonies in North America for their security and defense against the French. कि हम 13 colony अलग है, all 13 of different policies all together. Let us form a governor general. Why do we have only governor? एक कुछ unified policy बने ताकि if tomorrow if the French attack us, we should have a coordinated response against them. So they came together and gave a petition to British. Let us all 13 come together, create a post, give some right to that post to rule us collectively. So Benjamin Franklin made an appeal to the British government to treat Americans differently, but the British government did not pay attention to this appeal. He made Britain aware that of the new character of the America. He declared that America was in nation in the building process. तो ये शुरुआत तो पहले ही हो चुकी है. ठीक है, तो ये हो गई पूरी बैकग्राउंड ऑफ अमेरिकन रिवॉल्यूशन. समझ में आया? पक्का? इज इट डिफिकल्ट? डिफिकल्ट लगा आपको? डिफिकल्ट लगा? इट इज न्यू, इसलिए थोड़ा लग रहा है. बट when you say, but look at the question again, the last question, on the last page, the first question, that coming, आपके पास नोट्स नहीं है? लिया मैं बोलूँ एक नोट्स अंदर देना. So what is the question here? That the American Revolution was a natural and even expected event in the history of colonial people who had come of age. So this is coming of age. You have become matured. Self governance है, सब कुछ है. एक चीज नहीं है, वो है Defense. And defense चाहिए क्यों? Why do you need defense? See, spending money on defense is very costly affair. उससे नुकसान होता है. If you have to spend more and more on defense, it means you are not putting that resources into productive capacity for developmental purpose. So being under perpetual threat of security is actually one of the reasons for backwardness. क्योंकि आप improve health education कर ही नहीं सकते. In case of America, for this 150 years, the defense expenditure is managed by British. उनको करना ही नहीं है. And then once they become independent, for next 100 years, वो बोलते हैं will not take part in any old world affair. हम अपने यहाँ पे रहेंगे, यहाँ की छोटे छोटे वॉर हम खुद कर लेंगे. अब यहाँ पे उनको धोखा क्या ही है. So again, for next few decades, after independence also, they don't have to spend much on defense. तो डिफेंस के पैसे उन्होंने पूरे 200-250 साल बचा दिए, प्रोग्रेस कर लिया, पैसे कम. अब बाद में क्या किया? वर्ल्ड वॉर, सब जगह जाके कोल्ड वॉर. Anyway, so what are the issues involved in the American Revolution? Again, we go back to these same two issues. One question that has been asked is the relationship between mercantilism of British and capitalism. So economic material basis of revolution and questions regarding that. And the second issue would be ideological. So let me give you a couple of names here if you want. You should remember these two historians' names. This person is from the economic background. He focuses on intellectual aspects. So if a question is asked to you and you have to historiographically answer the question, and then if it is a question of, let us say, mercantilism versus capitalism, who is the one who says these are the primary factors? क्या नाम है इनका? Louis Hacker. In case of the other question, ideology is important, who is the one? Bernard Belin. आपको हर सवाल में दोनों यूज करने हैं in critical analysis. ठीक है, so you have got some historiography. We will not go into details of the arguments because in the world history we don't see much of historiography. थोड़ा थोड़ा देखेंगे, जहाँ जहाँ काम है यहाँ पे काम है. ठीक है. So right now we are looking at the argument of Louis Hacker in the issue number A, mercantilism versus capitalism, and in next issue we'll look at the arguments of Bernard Belin also. ठीक है. Let us begin. So it was a conflict between British mercantilism and American capitalism. American Revolution starts in the year of 1776, as you are well aware by now. 1776, as I had already said, is a very seminal year because that is the year in which revolution starts on one side. So American Revolution, because it represents the capitalist ethos, puts the final nail in the coffin of mercantilism. It is the very same year, even in Europe, you have the revolt against mercantilism in the name of wealth of nations. Adam Smith published the book in that year only, 1776. So in Europe and America, both you see the attack on mercantilism with the help of these two different instances happening in the very same year. तीसरी बात भी होती है. I discussed three things in 1776. The third thing is that James Watt designed, successfully implemented steam engine. So industrial revolution भी वहीं पे वहाँ शुरू हो जाती है. So these three things happening in the same year. But anyway, focus on American context. ऐसे कहा जाता है कि अमेरिका is born out of capitalism. उसका जन्म ही capitalism हुआ है. America's father is capitalism and mother is industrial revolution. That is how America is created. उनका DNA में है पहले से वो. We can actually write this sentence in the notes. America is born out of capitalism. Its father is capitalism and mother is industrial revolution. No chats. Let us quickly revise what is mercantilism first. What are the features? The first feature we have discussed is already threadbare when we discussed enlightenment, economic enlightenment. We discussed mercantilism, then we discussed physiocrats, and then we discussed free trade also, laissez-faire. याद है? So क्या क्या features? एक तो active participation of the state in economy to earn money. It is the European monarchs now hijacking commercial revolution. So it has to go for trade surplus, especially bullion surplus, crude bullionism, सारा सोना चांदी अंदर आए, and it believes in zero sum game. If I am profiting, somebody has to lose. Somebody is profiting, I have to lose. Then it also talks about colonies being existing for the purpose of mother country. Colonies exist for the purpose of mother country itself. That is important part. So अमेरिका का exist वजूद क्या है? अपने मदर कंट्री की सेवा करना. So you can loot, you can put economic policies the way you want, you can shape their economy as per your requirement. इंडिया में वही हुआ कि हमारी इंडस्ट्री खत्म कर दी. We had de-industrialization 19th century and we are exporting cotton for example. कॉटन क्यों जा रहा है? उनको चाहिए वहाँ पे उनके इंडस्ट्री में. तो अपनी इकोनॉमी पूरी हमारी जरूरत की बात ही नहीं करेंगे. Depending on what they need, they will shape our economy. The same thing was attempted in the case of America. The second aspect of the colonial dimension of mercantilism is that no two colonies will trade with each other directly by bypassing mother country. Agar there is one colony over here, other colony over here, and there is mother country over here, so it should always be like this. This is completely disallowed. So if there is India and America, so from India it has to go to London, from London it has to go to America, not directly, because mother country should control everything. So if you want to industrialize yourself, then you don't allow others to industrialize. Industry अगर यहाँ पे होगी तो यहाँ पे मिलेगा raw material, जाएगा माल पक्का, but यहाँ पे industry allowed नहीं करनी. Again, mercantilism. So when you want to develop your own industry, you want to develop your own trade with other colonies, who is stopping you? Other country. And we have already seen Americans had the streak, had the DNA of capitalism, individualism, freedom, abundance, liberty. Capitalism goes in economy provided in the political structure you have liberalism. Exceptions है China आज के दिन में, वो नया चीज आया है. But till recent point, it was always and always believed that if you have freedom in market, that can sustain only when you have freedom in politics. So capitalism and liberalism go together. Anyway, so Americans were firm believers in philosophy of capitalism because they were self-made economically and struggled hard over generations to accumulate their wealth. Therefore, they loved nothing more than their own property. खून पसीना डाल के जो बनाया है, खुद से बनाया है, अब आके दिखाओ बीच में. They loved nothing more than their property. And during this phase, they did not receive any help from anybody. The second is, they had always fought through tough battles against heavy odds in the forest, against animals and other people, and in which they had a spirit that may the best man survive. Meritocracy. ताकत है तो जियोगे वरना मर जाओगे. There is no compassion. There is no welfare state here. खुद के बलबूते पे करना है. That is the spirit of capitalism. अगर आप जीते तो पूरा जीते वरना बिजनेस के बाहर. So that meritocracy was there in them from the beginning because that is how they had survived. They formed some settlement. Settlement was destroyed. खत्म. नहीं बनाओ करो. तो ultimately they survived through that spirit of meritocracy, of competition, and finished to death. That is there. That is also the spirit of capitalism. And then the spirit of individualism was also dominant. We had already seen that. Finally, the commercial revolution started to happen in 1730s, 1740s, and then we have Americans becoming commercially prosperous as well. In 1747, America used to import goods having value of 1 million pounds, but in 1770s, it increased to 4 million pounds. Now, commercial revolution. The monetary economy got an impetus to the development of internal and external trade. As a result of all this, the existing social structure, which was based on pattern client, gradually began to break down and new social relations were developing based on economic relations. So पहले क्या होता था, गांव का मुखिया है, उसने गांव बनाया, उसके पीछे से जो माइग्रेट करेगा he would be dependent on his मुखिया. आज के दिन में भी there is mystery. If from small village in eastern UP somebody goes to Mumbai and he starts working, then gradually will ask more people from village, आ जाओ आ जाओ. जब वो आएंगे तो they will be indebted कि हमारे मुखिया साहब है, सरदार है. तो सरदार वाला रिलेशनशिप जो है ना, वो सब जगह होता है when there is chain migration and you depend on the earlier people. But once you get into commercial idea, that dependence, the pattern client idea gets broken down. अब हर आदमी अकेला, हर आदमी इक्वल, मत पैसे की बात करो, ना कोई चाचा ना कोई सीनियर. So new social relationship were developed based on economic relations. So point is, all these things collectively had the DNA, buttress the DNA of capitalism in American society. And therefore, when the British would start putting the mercantilist policy, mercantilist laws, Americans would not like it. तो उन्होंने कब किया ये? They started doing it actually quite early. Quite early. To bring American colonies under strict control, England sought to prevent its colonies in America from trading, sought to prevent them. थोड़ा सा prevent them, एक ही बात हुई, repetition हो गया. From trading with other European countries and from developing a robust manufacturing industry themselves. How? What is the evidence of the mercantilist policy of British? The most important and the first evidence in Navigation Act. 1660, 1650, 1660, etc. Lots of them. They came in the background of the English Civil War. In 1650s actually, there was British Civil War going on. Oliver Cromwell and all those things. So in that, उसमें chaos का फायदा लेके Americans started to bypass London and have development. जब मदर कंट्री अपने आप में उलझी हुई है, विंडो मिला हुआ है, चलो खुद को डेवलप कर लो. In that, they started to have trade, for example, with Dutch people, trade with other European countries. London would not have allowed that, but at that time London was weak. जैसे London comes back, बंद करो इसको. How do बंद करो? Through the Navigation Acts. Navigation Acts actually brought lots of restrictions. For example, beginning in 1651, 60 and 66, the British Parliament adopted a series of legislation known as Navigation Acts. It tried to promote the British shipping industry at the cost of American shipping. If you want to export anything, for that you want to use ships, use our ships. कोई दुनिया भर की कहीं की ships आपको नहीं चलेगी. You have to use American ships only, British ships only. If you want to go for any other ship, provided at least 75% crew in that ship is of British origin. आप वो बात करो. So point है कि we want to control the trade and we also want to support the British shipping industry back in Britain. उनको फायदा हो. Then he tried to bring the monetary and policy and export-import policy. So for example, on the purchase of two products, tobacco and maize from American colonies, there was complete British monopoly. So it is creating both monopoly and monopsony. You know these two terms, monopoly, monopsony, जानते हो? What is monopoly? Doing what? Yes, so we have one seller and multiple buyers. That becomes monopoly. And when you have one multiple seller and one buyer, it becomes monopsony. फर्क समझ में आ रहा है? तो इसका मतलब this is seller's market, this is buyer's market. This person will decide कि मैं क्या भाव दूंगा, and this person decide मैं क्या भाव में बेचूंगा. So monopoly and monopsony. British are trying to create both on the colony. कि if you want to sell anything, बस हम ही खरीदेंगे, और if you want to buy anything, बस हम ही बेचेंगे. ठीक है? So, for example, they put controls on import and export. They have enumeration of product 1, product 2, product 3, product, all the commodities and what tax structure, etc. ताकि they can earn money. Not only that, British are now trying to develop their own industrial base, but they don't want any rival industry coming up, so they by law said कि no iron steel industry will come ever in America. सब बंद कर दो, तोड़ दो सब कुछ, अलाउ नहीं करेंगे. Last point over here, the taxes imposed by British they discouraged industrialization in America. They physically did not allow any iron foundry to come up there. आपको कुछ खरीदना है आयरन वाला, हमसे ले लो, हमारी फैक्ट्री बनी हुई है. So for trade, for monetary policy, for import export, for transportation, for industry, सब चीज पे control. That is the mercantilist idea. Now the point is that till this point of time, till here, that is till 1762, 64, इसके पहले जो कुछ हुआ है ना, बस ऑन पेपर था. Mercantilism was only on paper. It was never enforced. And whenever it was enforced, Americans could easily circumvent it, bypass it, smuggle something. So if they put import-export policy, कि this is something that we have monopoly, American कहें ठीक है भाई बोल दो, हम तो स्मगलिंग करेंगे. Country of smugglers है वो पूरी from day one, country of pirates. तो okay, on paper आप खुश, ट्रेड में हम खुश, चलने दो. It was the outcome of the doctrine of salutary neglect. It is only after 1762 gradually Americans start to actually enforce the mercantilist ideas. तब तक on paper थे 100 साल के लिए. ठीक, अमेरिकन बोले ठीक है. And what happened in 1762? That is the 7 Years' War. And when they really start exerting the ideas, tussle happens. 20 साल के अंदर अमेरिका इंडिपेंडेंट, within 20 years independent. वो स्टोरी है हमारी. So since the Americans were well matured and they were not dependent on the Britishers in any way, they refused to abide by these mercantilist regulations, which were actually enforced after 62. Therefore, the root of the American slogan, no taxation without representation, basically lay in this capitalist ambition. Root, R-O-O-T, root. ठीक है. Basically lay in this capitalist ambition of American colonies. These developments triggered the revolution in 1776. So when we analyze no taxation without representation, the first half, no taxation, is about the capitalist idea, nahi chalega. The second half, without representation, comes from the ideological development. We want to have say in the government. So this phrase actually combines both economic and political ideals, both material and ideological factors together. No taxation without representation. दोनों साथ में आता. ठीक है. Any doubt so far? Kanit sir? So what we have done? We have understood Louis Hacker's argument that it was a tussle between mercantilism and capitalism, and how the tussle actually played out we shall see in next part when we talk about the events which are unfolding gradually. आपको tussle पूरी कहानी वहां पता चलेगी, अभी तो बस philosophical बातें चल रही. Then you go to next part, that is Bernard Belin, the ideas. There was actually one historian at that time, his name was Jonathan, and not at that time, recently in the previous century, Israel. He said it was the revolution in the mind, or of the mind rather. So American Revolution was the revolution of the mind. Again, intellectual idea. Talking of the philosophical development, कि दिमाग में अपनी सोच में हम आत्मनिर्भर हो गए थे. That is the philosophy, not about economy. It's about mind. So how do we justify that Bernard Bellin's idea or the idea given to us by Jonathan Israel? क्या है वो? Simple है that there was development of ideology also, and it was inspired by Europeans only. So American Revolution was ideologically inspired by the Enlightenment thought, and especially by the British thinkers like John Locke, Harrington and Milton. So we have to see that also. Now, how is American Revolution connected to European Enlightenment, which we have already seen? You have to see on both sides. एक तो, what was the connection of the people and what was the connection of the ideas? Then you got to know. आपका आंसर में दोनों डायमेंशन होने चाहिए. So at the level of people, you see American scholars were widely influenced by Enlightenment because European enlightened people had created a utopia. यूटोपिया जहाँ पे जहाँ नहीं सुख दुख, जहाँ कुछ प्रॉब्लम्स ही नहीं है, वो देश कैसा होगा? When the picture of utopia was created by European Enlightenment thinkers, that picture was picture of America. ना नोबिलिटी है, ना चर्च है, अबंडेंट रिसोर्सेस, कॉर्निकोपिया, नो राजा, सब कुछ सेल्फ गवर्नमेंट, सब फ्रीडम कहाँ पे है? अमेरिका में है. सो व्हेन यूरोपियन थिंकर्स देमसेल्फ आर क्रिएटिंग अमेरिका, प्रेजिंग अमेरिकन कॉन्टिनेंट, तो यहाँ इनको क्यों पसंद नहीं आएगा? ये भी खुश, हमारी वाहवाही हो रही है वहाँ पे. So American scholars were widely influenced. European scholars had high praise for open society like American society. Even before independence, some American scholars like Thomas Jefferson and Benjamin Franklin had visited Europe. They were considered paragons of European thought. We have also seen that one of them also brought the copies of the Encyclopedia of Diderot from Paris to America. So personal connections hai. Common Sense by Thomas Paine. Thomas Paine in 1775 wrote a book. In 1775, that book is hugely infused with the ideas of enlightenment. We shall see the book in detail afterwards, but it is very important. In one sense, American Revolution was an extension of European question. Why? Because in Europe, the middle class is rising against mercantilist idea. In America, it is the American middle class rising against the mercantilist idea. And now they're actually getting to implement that. So Europeans चाह रहे हैं, Americans कर रहे हैं. And when Americans करेंगे, then Europeans will say, अच्छा ये सच में हो सकता है, हम भी करेंगे. Then happens French Revolution. ठीक है? So Americans were revolting against mercantilist policies being imposed on them in the form of navigation laws. These ideas connected Americans with European thinking. And then this is the level of connection. But you have to look at some specific thinkers also, especially John Locke and Montesquieu. These two are the primary important thinkers who have huge influence on American thought. John Locke, क्यों? Because he is the father of liberalism. He talks of natural rights. कौन से natural inalienable rights? That to life, liberty and property. Americans love nothing more than life, liberty and property. This is actually, these ideas, although created in the context of England in middle of 17th century, they apply to apply to America more. You know, thoda sa let me give you negative viewpoint. Negative perspective of these natural rights. Natural rights are very important. ये होने ही चाहिए. हर constitution fundamental rights है वो. They emerge into human rights also over time. But the context is very complicated. When you say right to property, कहाँ से आता? How to justify property? तो जॉन लॉक बोलता है ऐसी जमीन, बंजर जमीन, जंगल जहाँ पे कुछ नहीं बन रहा हो, इफ यू आर पुटिंग, आपका पसीना और खून उसमें डाल के आप कुछ बनाते हो, देन इट बिकम्स योर प्रॉपर्टी, देन यू हैव राइट टू दैट थिंग. आपने फॉरेस्ट क्लियर कर दिया एंड देन यू पुट योर एफर्ट्स ऑफ ईयर्स एंड ईयर्स टू कल्टिवेट अ गुड गार्डन आउट ऑफ इट, उसका फ्रूट जाएगा, आपका फ्रूट है. सो लैंड कम्स फ्रॉम नेचर, efforts come from human. When their human efforts are put into natural land, whatever comes out of it is your property. Simple idea. But there is a presumption. That presumption is land is not owned by somebody else already. It has to be a vacant land. Terra nullius. सच में अमेरिका vacant land था. Exactly. There were lots of Cherokees, Ichnookis, lots of tribes were there. उनका जमीन था, सदियों से सैक्रेड लैंड था उनका, उनके पहाड़, उनके सैक्रेड नदियाँ थी, सब कुछ था. बट दे वर नॉट कंसिडर्ड ह्यूमंस, दे वर नॉट कंसिडर्ड इक्वल्स. उनको हटा दो और फिर अपने एफर्ट दो. तो जॉन लॉक इज ब्लाइंड, एंड दैट ब्लाइंडनेस ऑल्सो यू कैन सी इन्फ्यूजिंग इनटू अमेरिकन कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन, अमेरिकन आइडियाज ऑफ एनलाइटनमेंट, कि भाई ये तो इंसान है ही नहीं. So there is huge amount of inequality, but still at the level of idea they are very powerful. Not only natural rights, Locke even says there is social contract, and if the government does not abide by social contract, and if the government infringes upon natural rights of life, liberty and property, the people have right to rebel against government, right to revolution if the consent is broken from government side. वो भी अमेरिका में है. In a way, American Constitution is a Lockean constitution. In a way, American Revolution is actually a Lockean revolution. He is the intellectual father of American Revolution. जो ideas है Locke से आते हैं, John Locke. So he is the most important person. But then we also have, actually you should write this term Lockean वाला, क्योंकि आपको वो कहीं ना कहीं आंसर में काम आएगा. It was a Lockean revolution. Then we have Montesquieu. We have discussed already. Montesquieu talked about separation of power. Rather, he talked about a very Newtonian type of separation of power. एकदम legislature अलग, judiciary अलग, executive अलग, 3 compartments watertight from each other. And in America, we have that. So much so that every year we see the budget pass नहीं होता Senate में. Shutdown आता है. पढ़ते हो ना अखबार में shutdown आएगा. हर साल होता है because of partisan politics. Why? Because the executive doesn't control the budget. If Senate doesn't pass the budget, executive पैसा नहीं है. Government can't pay its own salaries. In India, it doesn't happen because the executive can pass, the executive controls legislature. At least in the Lok Sabha, we have finance bill, money bill. वहाँ पे नहीं है वैसे. ठीक है. Then we have other people like James Harrington. He wrote a book, The Commonwealth of Oceania. It is his imagination. Oceania, he imagined as utopia, as an ideal state, where he believed that a democracy is most stable when a strong middle class exists, and that revolution is a consequence of a separation of economic and political power. Political power remains with the old people, economy is with new people, so tussle hona hi hona hai. But then its focus is on stability and middle class. It is important for us to understand because American Revolution is not the revolution of masses. वहाँ पैट्रियट्स नहीं है, वहाँ ब्लैक्स नहीं है, वहाँ रेड इंडियंस नहीं है, वुमेन बहुत कम है. ये किनकी रिवॉल्यूशन है? ओनली प्रॉपर्टीड रिच वाइट एलिट मिडिल क्लास. ठीक है. इसके लिए एक निगेटिव टर्म दी जाती है. आई डिड नॉट नो इट अर्लियर, बट जो एंटाइटल्ड ओल्ड स्कूल नोबिलिटी जो है अमेरिका में, दे आर कॉल्ड एज वॉस्प इन अ वेरी पेजोरेटिव वे. WASP, white Anglo-Saxon Protestant. By skin you are white, by religion you are Anglo-Saxon Protestants. And you are one of those generations जो पहले मेफ्लावर से आए थे. आपको लगता है आपका अधिकार है अमेरिका पे राज करना. You 10-15% people. What about rest of the 80%? What about George Floyd? वो बात आज उठ रही है. ठीक है. Anyway. So it was a middle class, it is a middle class ideas, middle class leadership, middle class execution. That is likewise in the case of French Revolution also, it was a middle class revolution. America also, it is middle class revolution. So that is a limitation, but again, it is connected to this idea. Then John Milton, it also supported Republican form of government. You have Sidney, he again opposes theory of divine rights and supports republicanism. So the point is, these are all ideas except Montesquieu, John Locke, Harrington, Milton, Sidney. Who are these people? British and not French. That is important for you to understand. Because in the Enlightenment spectrum of thinkers, the French were more radical. The British were relatively conservative. And American intellectual thinkers are connected more with the British tradition than with the French tradition, relatively. So they are radical, but the limits on radicalism are there. They are not as radical as the French Revolution होता है, जो सब समाज तहस बहस जला दो तोड़ दो. अमेरिकन उतना नहीं करते. They are एक कदम आगे जाएंगे, 10 कदम नहीं जाएंगे. अगर 10 कदम गए तो भाई इनके हाथ में सत्ता चली जाएगी, सबको मिलेगी सत्ता. फिर मिडिल क्लास का क्या? We are the white entitled 10-15%, हमारे पास सत्ता है. ठीक है. So that is also seen in the connection with British Enlightenment more than the French Enlightenment. And apart from see what happens generally, a question can be on the level of ideas or enlightenment both. If a question is about just mind, here or here also, if the question is only on the level of intellectual, then you talk of enlightenment and you talk of all these people and ideas. But instead of intellectual revolution or instead of the enlightenment, If UPSC asks you only ideas, then it has both parts, intellectual also and religious also. Right? Religious ideas also give motivation, as I already discussed in case of Munda, in case of Mopalas, religion plays important role. In American case also, it plays a very important role. So look at the wording of questions very well. If it is intellectual movement, then focus on only enlightenment. If it is ideas, then focus on religion also. Or let us say a question that is asked by UPSC about the mercantilism versus capitalism. In that case, you have to go for critical analysis. In critical analysis, you go to the second half of the answer, you discuss other ideas. In other ideas, one point would be enlightenment, the other point would be religion also. Right? So we have religious motivation to oppose tyranny. We have some historians like John Patrick Dickens and Harry S. Stout. अगर आपको नाम याद करने करो, वरना मत करो, कोई दिक्कत नहीं है. मेरा काम देना था, मैंने दे दिया. मुझे खुद को नाम याद नहीं रहते, आपको क्या रहे मतलब. So John Patrick Dickens says that the religious convictions that often undergird them, especially the Calvinist convictions that Locke himself held, resistance to tyranny. So when the British monarch George III starts becoming tyrannical, starts opposing the rational suggestions of the colonists rather, गुस्सा होता है. This is not self government, this is tyranny. और tyranny जुल्म के खिलाफ आवाज उठाना हमारे धर्म की बात है. The same thing goes in Sikhism, for example. गुरु नानक ने क्या कहा था? हलेमी राज, जुल्म सहन नहीं करेंगे. ये बात गुरु नानक सिखिज्म में कहाँ से आती है? Because of the teaching of gurus. Similar thing you can see over here. If the religion tells you, khatam. So you have the first great awakening, and that plays a huge role. That is connected over here. And I have discussed already with you, it plays role in multiple ways. For example, articulation. Of grievances. Creating utopia. Third, mobilization along community line. हम सारे चर्च के लोग साथ में आएंगे. And fourth, motivation to fight. On all these ways, you can see religion plays a very important role. That this land is our divine land. It is our God-given right to become rich. If any tyrant is trampling upon our God-given right, उसके खिलाफ जाना हमारा धर्म बनता है. So there is a religious component as well, although we focus on that very less. I do not expect a standalone question on only religion. नहीं पूछेगी UPSC. It can be only on economy or ideas, but this becomes your one point to add. एक पॉइंट आपका एक लाइन में पक्का ऐड हो सकता है. एट दैट टाइम यू वांट टू कोट सम हिस्टोरियन, कोट आइदर डिगिंस और स्टाउट, तो याद रहे दोनों एक ही बात कर रहे हैं. ठीक है. एंड देन यू गो फॉर ऑल दिस कॉन्फ्लिक्ट emerging into the struggle, which is a political constitutional conflict as well. Here you have two basic points of tussle. Point number one is British executive interfered to a great extent in the matter of American executive self-government की बात है. If we are running the colonies the way we are, it is our right. Who are you to intermingle? And then if you want to intermingle, then give us political right in your country also. And second issue is the issue of taxation. So this is a political tussle. British people said कि supremacy of parliament. Parliamentary supremacy is the very fundamental idea of British. Anybody who opposes that is the one who is opposing parliament. That is unconstitutional. उसको हमें suppress करना ही करना. So British were asserting the right of parliament to impose tax. According to the British, the parliament was an all-powerful institution, and all other institutions were just subjected to it. And so supremacy of parliament is idea on British side. On the other hand, according to Americans, men are enjoying certain natural rights that are above all laws, including parliamentary laws. Natural rights are inalienable. सरकार भी उसको नहीं छीन सकती. Life, liberty, property. So Americans were against so natural rights versus parliamentary supremacy. ये भी tussle है यहाँ पे. And that plays out in the case of taxation because life, liberty, property. Property मतलब taxation. So property के पास वही tax देगा. So it's lock-in issue. And here we have issue of self-government. So these are two important political issues also. समझ में आया? अब तक कोई दिक्कत? कोई दिक्कत? पक्का? Let me ask online. I'll get an opportunity to drink my coffee. जब ठंडी हो गई है. In doubt online? Sampath, are you following today? Okay, my boy is saying no. Let me proceed then. Acha, I took additional data voucher. Sampath actually watches class not live but recorded because the data is limited in his town. But now he has bought additional data just to watch live lectures. Oh, good. So now the background questions are done. Causes of revolution. Now we'll come to the story of the unfolding of the events one by one. The story happens very quickly. Story में facts ज़्यादा है, analysis कम है. Analysis जो करना था, we have done already. ठीक है. But story is something that will bring issues to life. So let us begin. Till 1763, as I said, Americans were living life which was largely free of any control from Britain because of the policy of salutary neglect. So the burden of taxes on Americans was much less than the burden borne by the British citizen. The British government was controlling only top layer of administration while most of the politico-administrative responsibilities were being handled by Americans themselves. We have seen this already. So self-government hai, neglect hai. American colonies were not a source of economic gains for Britain, but their significance was strategic and ceremonial. Now, despite spending money and not earning money, why are British controlling the British want to continue with the American colonies? Two reasons, strategic and ceremonial. Ceremonial तो मैंने बता दिया आपको, prestige in global level. Strategic is to oppose French colonies in America. So Canada is with French. If we vacate America, they will conquer America. वो नहीं चलेगा. So strategic reason is there. So the American empire was a matter of great prestige for British crown because it was not letting sun set on the British. इसके बारे में ना, Americans are actually very proud. British are very proud. In the 19th century, we have the empire stretching across the earth. From this end to that end, sun never sets on British crown. दिन कहीं ना कहीं दिन जहाँ होता है वहाँ पे हमारी जमीन है ही है. We're very proud of that. तो कार्ल मार्क्स ने कहा था कि ब्रिटिश लोग इतने चोर चक्के हैं कि रात के अंधेरे में पता नहीं क्या कर दे, भगवान भी नहीं चाहता कि अंधेरे में जाए. Even the God doesn't trust British in the darkness of night. Anyway, so this point is covered. Now, what happens? We have the 7 years. 7 years war actually is a war between British and French, Austria, Prussia, everywhere. It's a world war of that era. It is fought in every continent. It is a world war of that era. By the standard of the First World War, Second World War, it is not that destructive, but लाखों लोग मारे गए थे. 10-15 लाख लोग मारे गए हर दुनिया में. तो it's a world war of that era of the 18th century. World War ही है वो. Now at the end of the war, something happened. The situation changed. What happened in the war is that French are defeated, British won the war. Once the British win the war, they get hold of Canada. Canada passes from French to British. अब इसके दो मानने होते हैं. On the British side, the war is fought for 7 years. It is very expensive. और जिनके लिए किया है उनसे तो टैक्स ही नहीं ले रहे. We fought the war for British, of Americans, and Americans are not paying tax. So now we need to at least generate some resources to pay the debt. During the war, Americans created a debt of 4 million pounds. and just the interest on that debt was equal to half the national budget of Britain. Interest on the debt incurred to fight the World War at that World War matlab 7 years war was half of the national budget of Britain at that time. It was a huge expense. Recover to karna padega kahin na kahin. And who is one of the prime beneficiaries of the war? Americans. So we have partly fought it for them. They should bear some cost of it. So if you look from the British side, demand bilkul najaiz nahi hai. From the American side, for 150 years they needed support of British army because they did not want to spend money on army. They had no army of their own. They had self-government but no army. And the army was required because they had threat of French invasion. When the French are gone, अब ये बोलेंगे ब्रिटिश आप भी चले जाओ, अब हमें कोई नहीं चाहिए, एहसान फरामोश है ना. So that is how it looks. So Americans get now more emboldened to assert their self-independence because the threat of the other colony is removed at the end of 7 years war. So attitude of both Americans and British start to change after 7 years war and Treaty of Paris. That is the point of beginning of our story. Okay? It was a very expensive war. After that, the British government was no longer worried about the possibility of any French invasion from north. The feeling of insecurity among the Americans from the side of French was also no more. Clear? And thus you have the policy change coming up one by one. Now, because of that huge loss-making affair, there is a change in, there is a rejection of the policy of salutary neglect. And now America is actively being intervened by British. अब वो एक्टिव देखें, अब क्यों करेंगे, क्योंकि पैसे चाहिए. So after 1763, now therefore go to our timeline here. This ये अपनी timeline थी. Now what I will do, I will blow over this timeline and I'll take this and expand it. So 1763 to 1775, 76 to 1782. This is the story. Matlab, these are the years, these 10-15 years. This is the year in which you have the beginning of American Revolution. The people have started to assert their authority. But there is no beginning of American War of Independence. The two terms, American War of Independence and American Revolution, are overlapping, but not the same. They are not the same. There are some aspects of revolution which start much before the war begins and continue after the war is over. There are some aspects of war which are unconnected to revolutionary ideals. Revolution may say right to equality of everybody. Sab equality to hai nahi. War mein there is no equality of everybody. So when you say that what is the connection between American Revolution and American War of Independence, are they do the same thing? They are not the same thing. It's like this. This is American War of Independence. This is American Revolution. And there is an overlapping area. Some aspects of revolution are different. They are not implemented. And some aspects of war are very backward and are very ethnic and superiority racial wale. They are not part of revolution. समझ में आया? So from 63 to 75, 75 में actual war begins. Physical war, firing begins in Concord and Lexington in Massachusetts. And it goes on for a few years. So right now we are studying from 63, 62 to 75, gradually how the tensions escalated and the crisis precipitated. ये कहानी पहले पढ़ेंगे. So when I say immediate events before the war, the revolution has started to come into being, are these events. 63 to 75, 10-15 साल की बात है. ठीक है, वो कहानी आप देख रहे हैं. So in 63, just after the Treaty of Paris, in which the French were defeated and Canada passed from French to British, British now started to tighten the bolts. अब इनको टाइट करेंगे, अब हमें जरूरत भी है. Now how do you tighten the bolts? The first thing, the king, monarch George III, gave a proclamation. It is called Royal Proclamation of 1763. It stopped the Americans फॉर एक्सपांडिंग वेस्टवर्ड्स कि आप ये अपालेचिनियन माउंटेन्स के वेस्ट में नाउ वी विल नॉट गो, जहां है वही रुको. This is completely unacceptable to Americans. British have their own idea. Why do British want Americans not to expand westwards and create new settlements? They have some fear. Fear number one, for example, on the west, Indian Americans are living, Red Indians. They also have entered some kind of agreement with British now. तो उनको अमेरिकन को, ब्रिटिश को तो मजा आता है डिवाइड एंड रूल करने में. बोलेंगे इनके भी अधिकार है, उनके भी अधिकार है, हम डिसाइड करेंगे किसके अधिकार क्या है. दैट इज ब्रिटिश स्ट्रेटेजी, डिवाइड एंड रूल. सो दे वांटेड टू नाउ सपोर्ट दी रेड इंडियंस आल्सो, एंड अमेरिकन्स डोंट लाइक दैट बिकॉज दे थिंक ये कौन लोग, इंसान थोड़ी है, तो जानवर है, जमीन हमें हड़पनी है, हम लैंड माफिया है यहाँ के. हु आर ब्रिटिश टेलिंग अस नॉट टू बी लैंड माफिया एनीमोर. So that one thing is not liked by Americans, but British have that intention. The second and more important intention of British disallowing Americans from going westwards is that if they go westward, they will bring more land under cultivation. It will create more demand for farm labor. It will create more possibilities, avenues of progress. Therefore, it will attract labor from England into America. तो हमारे यहाँ के जो मजदूर है वो सारे भाग के वहां चले जाएंगे अमेरिका में. तो हमारा काम कौन करेगा? Who will work on our fields? Who will be labor in our country? If we allow them, तो हमें नहीं. तो पॉइंट है कि whatever serve the interest of Britain will be imposed on America, not because it suits America, but because it suits Britain. That is the very idea of mercantilism, right? So Americans do not like any constraint on the freedom of going westward expansion. The second and more important thing is British sought to recoup the expenses borne defending the colonies. कि हमने आपके डिफेंस के लिए जो खर्चा किया है in the 7 years war, now we want to recover that, and it's a huge amount. I said 4 million pounds was the loan, and the interest on that was half the national budget of Britain. It is not a joke, not a joke. And not only that, afterwards British have kept a huge army in America which also needs to be paid salary. कहाँ से आएंगे पैसे? ब्रिटिश वाले अमेरिकन पैसे दो. So that is the whole context that they start putting taxes. At that time, the prime minister is George Granville. George Granville is the prime minister in London. He is the first prime minister. He is the prime minister of George III. So George III is the king and Granville is the prime minister. फर्क समझते हो? तो इनका कॉन्टेक्स्ट है. सो ग्रैनविल के बारे में सम हिस्टोरियन ने कहा है कि नुकसान तो पहले से होता था अंग्रेजों का. इट ड्रेन ऑफ वेल्थ वॉज इन द रिवर्स डायरेक्शन. मनी यूज टू बी स्पेंड बाय इंग्लिश ऑन अमेरिकन रादर देन वाइस वर्सा फॉर डिकेड्स एंड डिकेड्स, एंड नोबडी न्यू दैट इंग्लैंड के अंदर इतना भ्रष्टाचार था. देयर वाज सो मच करप्शन, सो मच एनार्की, मतलब सो मच कंफ्यूजन and so much power tussle between the monarchy of Hanovers and the new Lord House of Lord कि किसी के पास ना समय था ना इंटरेस्ट था टू लुक इनटू द अकाउंट्स ऑफ अमेरिका. तो चल रहा है. जब डेढ़ बढ़ा तो किसी हिस्टोरियन ने कहा है कि द रीजन दैट ग्रैनविल स्टार्टेड टू पुट टैक्सेस ऑन अमेरिका इज दैट उसने अमेरिकन खत खोलना, करस्पॉन्डेंस को खोल के पढ़ना शुरू किया. ही जस्ट ओपन द करस्पॉन्डेंस ऑफ अमेरिकन कॉलोनीज. अरे इतना खर्चा, डूब गए, लंका लग गई, दिवालिया निकल गए, अब कैसे होगा? ये तो पहले से निकल रही थी, आप देखते नहीं थे. तो पॉइंट इज दैट ग्रैनविल स्टार्टेड टू टाइटन द कंट्रोल on the economic and foreign policy of colonies, and colonies did not like it because they have developed a spirit of self-government since the beginning. And how did Granville do that? Granville started to adopt certain measures, and these measures are interesting. First thing, to strictly enforce navigation laws. Navigation laws are there since the Dutch War, not Dutch War, since the English Civil War of 1640s and 50s, right? But now they are being implemented so that they can control the trade. Then you have new taxes like Stamp Act, Currency Act, Quartering Act, and Sugar Act, etc. were imposed by the British Parliament. Now, what is Stamp Act? Stamp Act is you want to use any published paper, a newspaper, government document, anything, you have to carry a stamp. Book publishing stamp, newspaper stamp, registration stamp. And stamp कहाँ से आएगा? Sticker तो है, वो और क्या है? You have to pay tax to government, stamp duty. So government is trying to earn money. अब ये समझो, who are the people who use paper, newspaper, registration of property, middle class, educated class, mercantile community, and these are the last people you want to offend. इनसे पैसा निकालोगे तो ये तो आपके खिलाफ एकदम दहाड़ लगा देंगे पूरी. मिडिल क्लास को ऑपरेट मत करो. बट बिकॉज दिस पीपल आर एजुकेटेड, दे आर अवेयर, दे आर द वंस हु कैरी द एनलाइटमेंट आइडिया, उन्हीं को चूसना शुरू कर दिया. अगर आप ऐसी कोई पॉलिसी लेके आते, इफ यू हैड ब्रॉट सम सच पॉलिसी बाय विच यू हैव एक्सट्रैक्टेड मनी आउट ऑफ लोअर क्लास, दिस क्लास वुड नॉट हैव माइंडेड. बट उनको जो पिंच होता है तब आवाज आती है. So it was a very wrong policy on Granville's side. It was a mistake to go for Stamp Act. Secondly, you have Currency Act. Currency cannot be printed by the colonies anymore. Currency will have to come from England. So if you control the currency, maybe paper or metal, any currency, it means you're controlling monetary policy, you're controlling banking system altogether. Again, the control is done for the British benefit, not American benefit. They're losing self-governance or their own monetary policy. Then you have Quartering Act. What is Quartering Act? In ancient India, the tax you find in Arthashastra called Sena Bhukta. If the army is passing through your area, you provide food and fodder to the army. घोड़ों के लिए चारा, इंसान के लिए खाना, दाना पानी. तो दाना पानी वो जो चीज है, तो if the British army is stationed in American colonies, उनका दाना पानी कौन करेगा? Americans will have to provide provisioning of the army, that is Quartering Act. इसके बदले क्या मिले? कुछ नहीं मिलेगा. And then Sugar Act. So the molasses was imported from other places, Central America, etc. And then some kind of tax was put. Actually, I'll be very honest with you. There is a misconception among students and also amongst teachers that these taxes increased the cost, the rather price in the market. It is not true. It is not true. Take Sugar Act for example. In Sugar Act, the tax on molasses, जो कि पुराना था, molasses tax was old. It was 6 cents per pound or something. It was reduced to half. तो Sugar Act में actual tax घटाया है, बढ़ाया नहीं है. Yet people started to feel the pinch because when it was 6 pence, British used to not implement it. Americans were found fine with any number as long as you don't implement it. We smuggle, we don't follow the laws. But when you reduce the amount and actually implement it by saying that there will be no more smuggling, you create local courts, you enforce the act, तब जाके pinching हो. सारे smugglers नाराज हो गए. So you see what is, and not only smugglers, to implement that act, they also created admiral courts, the local courts in the colonies, which were very lenient towards smugglers. सारे स्मगलर ही थे. अमेरिकन क्या है, स्मगलर तो थे. So they used to क्या बोलते हैं, wink wink nod nod, तेरी चुप मेरी चुप. But when British said कि now the cases will be fought not in the American court but in British court, और वो फिर enforce करेंगे, तो इनकी जल गई. So point is not that the taxes increase the price. Taxes did not increase the price. Taxes rather reduce the price, but it controlled the smuggling. So who is getting offended? If you go by the Stamp Act, it is the people who are educated, literate, middle class. If you go by Anti-Smuggling Act, the smugglers. If you go by the admiral courts, the people who wanted self-government. If you go by other currency and quartering, the local people. So everybody who has some property, who has some resources and who is educated, they are all now feeling the pain. And they all start coming together. So across the class divide, north, central, south, across the different industry, trade and agriculture, across the legal people and smugglers, सबों को अब थोड़ा थोड़ा परेशानी है. Everybody is angry. ये क्या हो गया? Americans love nothing more than the property, not in the parents. Understand that. हमसे खून चूस रहे हो आप. So Americans started to respond. Response came in a very ferocious way. It alienated the people. Especially the Stamp Act was considered most notorious. So as I said earlier, also taxes were imposed, but now they are actually implemented. That is the point. So what the Americans said, they started saying that Americans, such taxes on commerce alienated powerful interests, including well-off traders in the north and prosperous planters in the south. British American colonies, especially middle-class merchants, smugglers, political leaders were enraged. And the protest happened. The protest led to the emergence of new leadership altogether. And what was the protest all about? About the taxes, but not about taxes, about the right to representation. हम taxes मानेंगे, provided we have our own MPs in your parliament. So you have the no taxation without representation. That is the political ideology. So during this Stamp Act crisis, news began to focus on events throughout the 13 colonies. तो सब जगह खबरें फैल रही है. All the colonies are participating, debate, public debate, newspaper, imagined community of a unity of 13 communities now coming into being. And then they complained that tax was enacted in England without the colonist input, without our consent. John Locke says consent of the governed is important. If you want to curb any natural right of life, liberty, property means tax, then you have to our consent. We have not consented. Now how can we give you consent provided our people become MPs in your parliament? वो पहले करो. It's a Lockean idea, Lockean revolution. ये तो बोल रहा हूँ. So Patrick Henry, first important person for us. Just make a note of all the people one by one. I will make a note for you. Roster of leaders तो start करते हैं. First is Patrick Henry. इनको रटना है आपको. Patrick Henry called George III a despotic ruler and made a resolution in the Virginia Assembly that only American representatives could tax Americans. Ultimately, what happened? Delegates from the 9 colonies came together and they formed a Congress. And that Congress led to name of Stamp Act Congress. तो सारे लोग इकट्ठा होके अब आवाज बुलंद करेंगे. So we have something called as Stamp Act Congress, and then it was the effort primarily of Patrick Henry, and the second is James Otis. So we have second person, James Otis Jr. And in that Stamp Act Congress, it decided to boycott the British goods, and it gave a slogan of no taxation without representation. So that slogan actually is outcome of the Stamp Act Congress. It was opposing the Stamp Act. Who put the Stamp Act? Who is the Prime Minister? George Granville. George III तो राजा है. George Granville. ठीक है. And why did he put the Stamp Act? Because of 7 years war and expenses. In the Congress, the right of British Parliament to impose internal tax, excise and sales, etc. was questioned. The external tax was not questioned. तो ये बोल रहे थे आप बाहर वाला टैक्स जो ठीक है वो हम आपके कॉलोनी तो है ही. So the demand is not for independence. And the demand is not for independence. The demand is for having the rights of British citizen. British citizen in England gets the right of representation for taxation. Why don't we? So the demand is Americans are asking हमें अंग्रेज की तरह अधिकार दे दो. That's all. Simple. This was the first major coordinated action by the colonies together. So the conflict started here. Apart from the Stamp Act Congress, in every region you have the beginning of committees. They are called committees of correspondence. This is an important aspect. Committees of correspondence, multiple of them, Boston Committee, Massachusetts Committee, Virginia, etc. In different regions, different committees of correspondence come into being. They start implementing the boycott of the British goods. स्वदेशी की बात कर रहे हैं जो हम कर रहे थे. And that boycott is implemented so firmly, these committees unite with each other, they collaborate, they gradually start implementing all the policies. They become violent also after a point. So much so कि अगर आपने मेरी बात नहीं मानी तो मैं आपको पूरे चेहरे पे टार लगा दूंगा. So even within Americans, those Americans who were not supporting the boycott and buying British goods, उनको जाके फिजिकली परेशान किया. जैसे हमारे चप्पल का हार पहनना, स्याही मुंह पे डालना, ये सब कहाँ से आता है? मॉडर्न पॉलिटिक्स यहीं से तो आता है. This is the era of the emergence of modern politics. उसमें ये भी चीज है. But my point is, over time, these committees start acting as shadow governments. So when the Declaration of American Independence will come in 1775-76, by that time it is just a declaration. On ground, the reality has already happened. Because of the self-government, जो लेजिस्लेचर तो बने हुए, लेजिस्लेचर अलग है, ये अलग से क्या आता है, लोगों की कमेटी बनना, पैरेलल गवर्नमेंट, शैडो गवर्नमेंट, and they start functioning as government. They collect money, they spend money, they create army, also, so that they have espionage network, they implement policies. So and one of that, so they almost behave like government, self government. And then we have Sons of Liberty. This is also one of the organization started at that time कि हम Sons of Liberty है. Even today people have that tradition in the WASP families, white Anglo-Saxon Protestant. उसके सामने आपको एच भी लगता है, व्हाइट एंग्लो सैक्सन प्रोटेस्टेंट हेटेरोसेक्सुअल, चलो वो अलग बात है. एनी द पॉइंट इज दैट दे हैव इन देयर फैमिली की 15 जनरेशंस पहले माय फोर फादर्स वेर पार्ट ऑफ सन्स ऑफ लिबर्टी. उनको अभी भी रिकॉर्ड्स होते हैं उसके, हमने उस परंपरा से आते हैं. दे फील दैट्स अ बैज ऑफ ऑनर कि वे पार्ट सन्स ऑफ लिबर्टी. वो तो कुछ नहीं, लोग आए थे, इकट्ठा हुए, आंदोलन किया, मोर्चा लगाया, स्लोगन दिए, थोड़ा वायलेंस किया, दो चार लोगों को पीटा, यहाँ हुआ, चले गए. That is the crux of it. But Sons of Liberty, to oppose the unfair taxation and coordinate the action, it was formed in Boston. The important role played there was by Samuel Adams. एक और नाम लिख लो, Samuel Adams. So पैट्रिक हेनरी ने क्या किया था? स्टैम्प बैक कांग्रेस. ये आपको आंसर में लिखना है, पूरी कहानी लिखनी नहीं है. He was the soul behind it. Then James Otis Jr. नो टैक्सेशन विदाउट स्लोगन दिया उसने, नो टैक्सेशन विदाउट रिप्रेजेंटेशन स्लोगन. इन केस ऑफ सैमुअल एडम्स, सन्स ऑफ लिबर्टी, बोस्टन में. तो यूपीएससी आस्क क्वेश्चंस लाइक दिस. आपको एसेंस निकालना है, पूरी कहानी बतानी नहीं है, एक एक लाइन बस, खत्म. Ultimately, because of the Stamp Act, Congress, and opposition, etc., British buckled down. American efforts succeeded, and eventually the British backed down. Granville was soon dismissed by George III. George III ने कहा, तेरे से नहीं हो रहा, तू हट जा. Let me appoint a new prime minister. And new prime minister was Rockingham. And Rockingham, when he came, he abolished these new taxes, Stamp Act, Sugar Act, etc. सब abolish कर दिया. लेकिन British are typically British. They would abolish all the taxes because it is being opposed, but they would pass a new act called Declaratory Act, just to declare कि आज हम abolish कर रहे हैं, but हमारा अधिकार अबाधित है. If future we want, we can tax anything. Our parliament continues to have that right. ये हम declare कर रहे हैं. If we want, we can, but we won't because we don't want to. Simple idea. Declaration. Declaratory Act. कुछ tax नहीं है उसमें. There is no tax. It is just open declaration. The sense of house is that in future, if we want, we can do that. We retain the authority to impose taxes. Declare कर दिया बस, ताकि हम पीछे भी आए लेकिन हम गिरे भी ना. So that is the point. People don't like that. Americans did not like that and they opposed, but वो opposition was manageable because Americans are okay, कागज पे लिखना है लिखो, हमें क्या करना है, पैसे देने नहीं पड़ रहे ना, लिखना है लिखो, ठीक है. Then you go to next era. Next you have, अब एक और चीज है. So far what has happened is in the first round of confrontation, Americans have won. The Stamp Act, etc. is now revoked, abolished. Now they get emboldened. They think कि हाँ हमसे होगा. In future, if you put any tax again without this, then we will oppose once more, and we have been successful once, we will successful once more. So people now get emboldened. The bad precedent is set from the viewpoint of British. Then you go to next, we have next Prime Minister, Pitt the Elder, and he appoints his Finance Minister, Townshend. Now Townshend is a new Finance Minister. वो थोड़ा सा एक तरकीब निकालता है, बोलते अच्छा अमेरिकन्स. In Stamp Act, Congress, you had said no taxation without representation in the case of internal taxes, but you have not said that in the case of external taxes. So let me put external taxes then. मैं आपका इंपोर्ट एक्सपोर्ट पे टैक्स लगा देता हूँ, कोई दिक्कत नहीं है मुझे, अंदर वाले नहीं तो नहीं. So he established a series of acts called Townshend Acts to execute parliament's right to impose external taxes, which placed indirect tax on a few items like glass, lead, pens, paper, coinage, tea, etc. So all these essential commodities which were imported from Britain into America, उस पर टैक्स लगा दो. कहने को है indirect tax, कहने को है import export duty, but when somebody pays that duty on the port and the good comes into the market, उसकी प्राइस तो बढ़ गई है. So people are paying for it. It is not internal tax technically, but its influence can be seen on internal pricing in the market because it is being taxed at the port. And America is dependent for these commodities, essential commodities, on England. तो इंग्लैंड की जो मोनोपोली बनी हुई है, इन उसका फायदा उठाएंगे. And these goods are consumed by common people. So far, Stamp Act में it is all middle class. Now you see gradually some common people who feel the pain also start participating into it. So you have this thing coming up. So again, it also created a new board of customs to stop smuggling. Americans actually have no problem because British are reducing the taxes further and further, but they're stamping out the smuggling. Americans want, I think, मतलब कभी कभी jokingly मेरे sir बोलते थे, Lockean natural rights got modified when they went to America. In England, John Locke had said, natural rights किस चीज के? Life, liberty and property. Americans ने कहा life, liberty, property and smuggling. ये हमारे natural rights है. So anyway, Americans responded to Townshend Acts again. This time, from the very beginning, they started protesting. They went for boycott even more fiercely. After Stamp Act, they had formed Sons of Liberty. Now they form Daughters of Liberty. Even the women start coming into boycotting by supporting the homespun cloths to replace British one. India wali kahani, Swadeshi wali kahani hai ye. Simple. And then to public opposition this time goes to next level. It becomes little aggressive and violent. So much so that in Boston you have firing. The firing leads to Boston massacre. It's a very famous photo of Boston massacre. I had been to Boston once. वहाँ पे I went to this church. चर्च के सामने फायरिंग हुआ तो जमीन पे लिखा हुआ है this place of Boston massacre. मैंने कहा अच्छा कितने लोग मरे मैसेकर में आपके यहाँ? हमारे 1770 फेमाइन आया था, मिलियन लोग मरे थे. 1857 में दिल्ली शहर के अंदर ब्रिटिश एग्जीक्यूटेड 1 लाख पीपल. मैसेकर इज अ बिग थिंग. कितने लोग मरे? 3000 नहीं, 3, एंड बाद में 2 मरे तो 5 टोटल. सो इट्स द लीस्ट मैसेक्री ऑफ ऑल मैसेकर्स इन द वर्ल्ड. बट अब उनके पास इतने लोग मरते वो क्या कहेंगे? उसको मैसेकर बोलेंगे. बट इट इज इंपॉर्टेंट बिकॉज इट इज द फर्स्ट फिजिकल confrontation that you have between the two. An interesting side story over here that after the massacre, British started trial on the British soldiers who fired. कि आपने फायरिंग किया, गलत किया, मुकदमा चलेगा. And in that trial, 9 soldiers were accused, of which 7 were released. दोनों को सजा हुई. And why would 7 be released? Because of one person who was a great lawyer at that time. His name was John Adams. So he actually fought the case from the British side in the court and helped the release of majority of the soldiers. But later on, after a few years, he shifted the side, switched the side and came back to American side. And he became one of the great founding fathers. But is samay he was on the British side. So we had one more name, John Adams. To your story. But after Boston massacre, some years go by, some prime ministers change, then you have Lord North. Lord North becomes next important prime minister who comes. And by that time, the opposition has become so much that he has to remove all the townshend taxes. Even internal tax to pehle hi abolish kare the, and in that place they had declaratory act. Now they are abolishing all the external taxes also, except for one. Because कहीं ना कहीं आपको आपकी authority maintain करनी है. They said we have opposition, so we will not put any tax except for please give us one tax just to show that we have the authority. And that was on tea. चाय पे बरकरार रहेगा. So lead, copper, coinage, whatever is there, glass, etc. all of them were removed from the tax list. Only tea continued. And then they also gave the monopoly of tea import to East India Company. वही East India Company जो exactly at that time has done Plassey and Buxar. उसी समय की बात है ये. So East India Company, so with all other items except tea, the Parliament passed the Tea Act in 1773 designed to aid the financially troubled East India Company by granting it a monopoly. अब देखो बात क्या है, अगेन देयर इज अ ह्यूज गलत फहमी कि टी के ऊपर टैक्स आया, चाय महंगा हो गया, अमेरिकन्स रिवोल्टेड, प्राइस राइज. नो, चाय सस्ता हुआ. द टी, एज आई सेड, इन द मर्केंटलिस्ट एरा, originally it would go from Chinese plantations to England, and from England it would go to America. Now this policy was removed. East India Company could pay one-time fee at a place, easy facilitation counter पे जाके, and then directly via Pacific it can bring the tea bags to tea cartons to America. So you can bypass London, बहुत जगह बच गई, आपके पैसे बच गए. So tea became cheaper. Because of Tea Act, tea became cheaper. And British East India Company was facing lots of problems. So it could, so एक तीर में अनेक पंछी मारने की कोशिश करी गई. Firstly, all the taxes were removed. Americans were supposed to be happy. Secondly, East India Company was supported by tea monopoly. And thirdly, we also asserted the right to have taxation. Parliament has the authority. So all these things, so Lord North was very happy कि मैं कितना चाणक्य हूँ. फांसा पड़ गया उल्टा. कैसे? He initially has guessed कि भाई Americans are talking about money and property. क्या सस्ता तो हो रहा है. I am just clamping on smuggling, but Americans ने उल्टा शुरू कर दिया प्रचार पूरा. जो मिडिल क्लास था, मिडिल क्लास was now getting more bold. उन्होंने कहा ये नहीं, ये भी नहीं चलेगा. प्रचार ऐसे किया कि सस्ता चाय बना के हमको गुलाम बना रहे हैं. That was the whole idea. By they are enslaving and poisoning all the Americans by giving us cheaper tea. Literally, if you drink the British tea, तो आप effeminate बन जाओगे. Body will become weak. आपकी ताकत कम होगी लड़ने की, आप खत्म हो जाओगे. So एक तो उसमें कुछ ऐसा ingredient डाला हुआ है. If you drink that, you will become weak. So don't drink it. And even if it is not there, because you will buy it because it is सस्ता, मतलब आप उनके गुलाम बन गए. तो पूरा का पूरा प्रोपोगंडा कैसे काम करता है देखो. हो क्या रहा है, मिडिल क्लास नाउ वांट्स टू गो फॉर द आइडिया ऑफ प्रिंसिपल, दैट वी वांट रिप्रेजेंटेशन. टैक्स इज द इशू ऑफ प्रिंसिपल, नॉट अबाउट द क्वांटिटी ऑफ टैक्स. भले टैक्स 1% टैक्स का आप 0.1% कर दो, हमें वो भी नहीं चाहिए अनलेस एंड अनटिल वी हैव द रिप्रेजेंटेशन. इट्स अ क्वेश्चन ऑफ प्रिंसिपल, नॉट ऑफ द क्वांटम. So from middle class, that is the viewpoint. From smuggler class, उनको सस्ता चाय अगर अमेरिका में आएगा तो उनका दुकान बंद हो जाएगा. Smugglers don't want that to happen. They want the high trade barriers ताकि उनका smuggling profitable रहे. So the smuggling class and middle class are coming together. There is confluence of interest of people who are criminals or people who are middle class, educated, enlightened elite. ये सब जुड़ के मिलके रिवोल्यूशन करते हैं. वो हमेशा आपका वो कंपोनेंट ऑफ स्मगलर रहेगा. तो सस्ती चाय को भी अपोज, एंड देन पीपल को भड़काया गया बाय सेइंग एनस्लेविंग. इट्स वेरी इमोशनल आर्ग्यूमेंट. एंड देन पॉइजनिंग. इंडिया में नहीं था, गांधी जी बोलते नहीं थे खादी खादी खादी. खादी क्या अच्छी थी? वेल, इट वाज नॉट वेरी कंफर्टेबल, बट वो हमारी है, भले महंगी क्यों ना हो. अगर आप सस्ता कपड़ा खरीदोगे अंग्रेजों का, आप उनके गुलाम बन गए. यही तो बात है. सस्ती चाय मत पियो, महंगी चाय पियो, क्योंकि हमारी है. तो पॉइंट है कि द आर्ग्यूमेंट इज नाउ शिफ्टिंग टुवर्ड्स पैट्रियोटिज्म एंड द पॉलिटिकल आइडियाज. वो समझना बहुत जरूरी है. इट इज नॉट अबाउट द प्राइस राइज. इट इज नॉट. सो डिस्पाइट टैक्स, इट मेड द टी चीपर. American response, still the protest against taxation remained intact. Some colonists were upset that cheap tea would cut into the profits of smugglers and established tea merchants, but most were just angry on the issue of principle that we still have not got representation. Americans now thought this not a matter of tea, this is a matter of taxation over American products. It created anti-British environment. And then you have opposition coming on. So, एक बड़ा फेमस उस समय कोट था, टी वॉज अ वे ऑफ इंग्लैंड एनस्लेविंग अमेरिकन्स. हमें गुलाम बनाना चाहते हैं. सो पीपल इन वेरियस सिटीज स्टार्टेड टू अपोज द टी इम्पोर्ट. टी कंसाइनमेंट्स को फिजिकली उन्होंने रोकना शुरू किया. कोई इफ सम मर्चेंट इज ब्रिंगिंग टी, फिजिकली उसको रोको. सो मच सो दैट द सन्स ऑफ लिबर्टी पीपल अंडर द लीडरशिप ऑफ Samuel Adams went to Boston. In Boston, बोस्टन पोर्ट है, उस पोर्ट में एक बड़ा जहाज था, जहाज पे कई सारे बोस्टन टी कार्टन्स थे. They just went there and they put that all cartons into ocean. तो उसको बोलते it's a way of opposition, protest. Now why is it called Boston Tea Party? Because the entire water of ocean at that time became red. Tea Party. पूरा, क्योंकि इतने 350 कार्टन उन्होंने डाल दिए, बड़े बड़े कार्टन, इतना सारा चाय पानी में चला गया, सब पानी लाल लाल हो गया. मजे की बात यह है, द इंटरेस्टिंग थिंग इज दैट दे सेड henceforth द आइडिया बिकेम कि चाय मतलब ब्रिटिश, तो हम पियेंगे कॉफी. सो इवन टुडे ब्रिटिश ड्रिंक टी, अमेरिकन प्रीफर कॉफी. आज के दिन तक ये इनका कॉफी कल्चर. सारे कॉफी ब्रांड्स देखो कहाँ से आते हैं, अमेरिका से आते हैं बड़े बड़े. So that cultural changes happened. But interesting thing is that tea was not British. Till 1660s, just 100 years before, British did not even know the tea. Tea was Chinese. Tea later became Indian. But tea was not British. मतलब मजे की बात देखो कि चाय ना ब्रिटिश है, कॉफी ना अमेरिकन है, लेकिन वो बन गए उनके नेशनल आइडेंटिटी. क्या करे? Anyway, Boston Tea Party, it was a major defiance on the American side कि हम कानून नहीं मानेंगे. And now British said enough is enough. We have taken enough taxes backwards. Now we will not budge any further. So Lord North says now let us impose. अब इनको सबक सिखाएंगे. So British started to retaliate also physically for the first time. यहाँ पे बोस्टन टी पार्टी आती है, ब्रिटिश रिएक्शन आता है, अमेरिकन वॉर शुरू करते हैं. दिस इज द वे. इमीडिएट इंस्टेंस बिफोर 2 साल के अंदर युद्ध शुरू होता है. कैसे? Lord North passed a number of punitive laws. They are called coercive laws in British and intolerable acts in the colony. हम इनको सहन कर ही नहीं सकते ऐसे कानून लाए. कौन से कानून थे अब ये? It went to all round fallout. For example, the British government took an oppressive stance to suppress the rebellion and they decided to punish the whole of Massachusetts. They decided to punish not only the Sons of Liberty and Samuel Adams, जो 200-400 लोग गए होंगे, 50-20 लोग गए होंगे, उनके नहीं, हम पूरा कॉलोनी, entire province of Massachusetts को punish करेंगे. कैसे? We revoke the charter of Massachusetts. The self-government is gone. The legislature is abolished. The Boston port is closed. So entire state को उन्होंने punish करना शुरू किया. And then they put other laws also, whereby Quartering Act was implemented, Quebec Act was implemented, whereby the rights of self-government, rights of trade, सब धीरे धीरे हटाए गए. Pressure लाया. And British Parliament is doing for the first time. अब तक नहीं किया था. Response है. So for example, you have Quartering Act, force colonies to house British soldiers in their homes when ordered to give them food and support. The Quebec is a part of Canada. Quebec Act extended the southern boundary of Quebec and granted religious toleration to Catholics. Puritanical लोगों को पसंद नहीं था वो. Then they said कि भाई ये तो नहीं होगा. ये एक ही पॉइंट है एक्चुअली, गलती से एंटर दब गया. So British government's efforts to single out Massachusetts for punishment served only the purpose of uniting all the colonies, and the war was started. Ultimately, it led to the beginning of war in 1775. In which part of America? In Massachusetts only, Concord and Lexington. वहीं पे युद्ध शुरू होता है. But उसके पहले 1 year before that, मतलब 1 year after Boston Tea Party and 1 year before the war starts, you have First Continental Congress. ये बड़ी फेमस कहानी है. आई थिंक यू माइट नो इट. फोक हीरो पॉल रिवियर. बच्चा है, देन ही बिकम्स द क्लर्जीमैन ऑल्सो. द स्टोरी इज दैट व्हेन ब्रिटिश आर्मी कम्स इन बॉस्टन, रात के बजे, कुछ 2-4 बजे अंधेरे में, ये आदमी घोड़े पे बैठ के ही टेक्स द राउंड ऑफ एंटायर बॉस्टन सिटी. घर घर जाके ब्रिटिश आ रहे, ब्रिटिश आ रहे, ब्रिटिश आ रहे. एंड ही वॉन्ट्स एवरीबडी, ब्रिटिश आर्मी इज कमिंग. द पीपल गॉट सम टाइम to come together, get their हथियार and defend the city. 2-4 घंटे मिल गए उनको एक्स्ट्रा. उसकी वजह से बोस्टन शहर अंग्रेजों के हाथ तुरंत नहीं पड़ा. एंड देन शुरू से ही ब्रिटिश वेर ऑन डिफेंस, अमेरिकन वेर ऑन अग्रेशन बिकॉज ऑफ हिज. सो ही बिकम अ फोक हीरो उनकी कहानियों में, पॉल रिवियर. बट एनीवे, ये तो हमें पूछेंगे नहीं, ऐसे ही बता दिया. पॉइंट इज दैट ब्रिटिश अपोजिशन के लिए अमेरिकन नाउ हैव द फर्स्ट कॉन्टिनेंटल कांग्रेस. All the colonies except perhaps one colony come together and they form First Continental Congress, except Georgia. Here they decide to boycott English goods completely. Secondly, they sent a petition to parliament and king both कि हमारी बात मानो, no taxation without representation, take these taxes back, take these orders back, let us reconcile. So even in the first continental, they are not going for the complete independence demand. Abhi bhi Americans are asking for reconciliation. They want self-government and not independence. This kind of demand is called as olive branch proposal or olive branch petition. कि अभी भी युद्ध भयानक होता है, समझदारी की बात करो, then take the all problems back and reconcile. But it did not lead to anything. उससे कुछ हुआ ही नहीं. But important point here is that they are now asserting कि देखो first continental is very important for two things. एक तो सारे लोग लगभग साथ में आ गए. And who are the people coming together? These are the delegates. Delegates. So delegates are sent by whom? By the provincial legislatures. The provincial legislatures of 12 colonies are choosing some delegates and sending them to form a congress. अपने आप में formation of such congress of delegates of all the colonies is in itself a revolutionary act. And secondly, the demand that natural rights are inalienable. हमें अंग्रेजों के राइट जो है वो हमें चाहिए, नो टैक्सेशन विदाउट रिप्रेजेंटेशन वो हमें दो, वी विल स्टैंड बाय आवर ह्यूमन राइट्स. वो डिमांड भी बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट है. बट येट व्हाट इज नॉट देयर इज डिमांड फॉर इंडिपेंडेंस. आफ्टर द कांग्रेस, व्हेन द ऑलिव ब्रांच पिटिशन इज रिजेक्टेड, you have in 1775 beginning of the war at Concord and Lexington, and then the Battle of Bunker Hill. But we don't need to study the military history, so we'll skip that. But युद्ध शुरू होता है after first continental and before the second continental. Between the two congress of continental, first continental, second continental, इसके बीच में दो चीजें होती है. The first thing is that the war starts, it's a fait accompli. So when they meet the next time, the war has already started. And second thing is Thomas Paine wrote a book in England at that time. Its name is Common Sense. The Common Sense is actually a pamphlet. It's a incendiary book. ऐसी आग लगा देता है लोगों के मन में किताब वो. It's full of enlightenment ideas. What is that common sense? Well, it's a common sense that a country like America, which is a continent, cannot be perpetually ruled by England, which is an island. आप तो आइलैंड हो, हम कॉन्टिनेंट है, हमेशा के लिए राज कैसे? इट्स अ कॉमन सेंस. सो ही मेक्स अ वेरी पैशनेट प्ली फॉर कंप्लीट इंडिपेंडेंस. ये पहली बार हुआ, एंड इट बिकम्स वेरी परसुएसिव आर्गुमेंट फॉर एवरीबडी. सो मच सो ही सेज कि इट इज द गॉड गिवन मिशन ऑफ अमेरिका टू बी इंडिपेंडेंट, एंड इट इज द कॉज ऑफ एंटायर मैनकाइंड. पूरे ह्यूमैनिटी के लिए जरूरी है कि हम इंडिपेंडेंट हो जाए. इट्स अ वेरी पावरफुल सेंटिमेंट. वो लोगों के दिल में आग लगा दिया पूरा. बाय द नेक्स्ट टाइम दे मेट इन सेकंड कॉन्टिनेंट, दोबारा बात ही नहीं हुई, बात होगी बस इंडिपेंडेंस की. समटाइम्स पीपल से पेन इज माइटियर देन स्वॉर्ड. यू हैव द एग्जांपल हियर. युद्ध से जो नहीं होता किताब से हो सकता है. सो Thomas Paine, and Thomas Paine is an indication of the Enlightenment idea. So what is the influence of Enlightenment on people? You can see here also. He is the embodiment of Enlightenment ideals of freedom and independence and liberty. Then they meet in Second Continental Congress. In Second Continental Congress, lots of things happen. First of all, the war is started. They organize an army. Army is then given the head. Head is George Washington. Washington becomes general. He's from Virginia, undisputed head. He comes from Mount Vernon, etc. But anyway, so war starts. America gets a general. He is a great general, best of the generals. Second thing is you have it acted as a provisional government of 13 colonies. It started issuing currency, having navy, talking diplomacy with other nations, etc. So it becomes a provisional government in itself. Second Continental. Then you have it is declaring important document, Declaration of Independence. We the people of US. That becomes the foundational idea. पहली बार life, liberty and pursuit of happiness यहीं से आता है. Who is the one who wrote it? Franklin. And then it creates after a couple of years Articles of Confederation. How these states which are so jealous, which are so protective of their own independent rights, are coming together for some cause, but they don't want to give all the rights, authorities to the center government, union government. हम अपने अधिकार रखेंगे तो how to have a transaction of business? Let us create some kind of constitution. So they create their first constitution, that is called as Articles of Confederation. Here it is still United States of America, but it is not is, it is R. वो नहीं कहते I USA is and USA R. इस जमाने में बात R की हो रही है, is नहीं. Even in the terms, languages, correspondence, newspaper, USA are doing this. मतलब the states have retained their sovereignty. They are just coming together to find some kind of collaboration, but states are still independent. They have sovereignty. So you will see later on in American Constitution, they have double sovereignty and double citizenship. State भी sovereign है and center भी sovereign है. Citizenship इसकी भी है, उसकी भी है. So USA are. USA is कब बनता है? After Civil War. So साल के बाद. तब तक हर state was so jealous. तो point है कि for temporary amount of kind of collaboration, they create Articles of Confederation. It is the first US Constitution. अपने syllabus में you have a topic of American Constitution, but that topic is not this Constitution. Within a decade इसको खारिज करते हुए 10 साल के अंदर पता चलता है कि ये तो बेकार है. It is creating problems. Let us renegotiate entire terms of engagement. After the war is over, all the states and all the people again come together. They have constitutional assembly and they create a new constitution based on the experience of dysfunctionality of this constitution. और वो negotiation जब होता है वो अपने syllabus में है. So to study that in next lecture. लेकिन पहले अभी इसको देख लेते हैं. So this is the first constitution. Articles of Confederation comes in 1717. Here are some photos, famous photos. Independence Declaration by the Great Five given to George Washington. You have Washington surrounded by other people, etc. ठीक है. So now the war has started. अब यहीं रुकेंगे हम. We'll see tomorrow how the war proceeded, outcome, impact and Constitution of America. समझ में आ रहा है? पक्का? Clarity है thought की? चलो. Now let us before going ahead, let us look at the questions once more. Let me see if you feel confident of at least being able to decode the questions or not. The American Revolution was a natural and even expected event in the history of colonial people who had come of age. फंडा पता है. No taxation without representation. No taxation, mercantilism, representation, enlightenment idea. And we have the entire story also, Stamp Back Congress, James Otis, you read all of these things. Then the American Revolution was essentially an economic conflict between American capitalism and British mercantilism, critically examined. We know that. The question that they have not asked is enlightenment and ideology. वो शायद पूछे कभी future में. Then American Revolution seems to have come with remarkable suddenness. A roster of talented leaders emerged during 63 to 75 to make it happen. Will in this list of our leaders, जब बना रहे थे और नाम जुड़ जाएंगे धीरे धीरे. When we finish tomorrow's lecture, Benjamin Franklin, George Washington, you have other people also, दो चार लोग और जुड़ जाएंगे. When we discuss the Constitution also, then you have the entire list. You will not get much script. आपको 4-5 नाम लिखने का मौका मिलेगा, कोई भी लिख लो. Then do you understand that the lack of statesmanship in London during the 1760s and 70s was an important contributory factor? So statesmanship of whom? Of Granville, of Lord North, of Townshend. So सारे series of prime minister and also of George III, the monarch, who was not willing to compromise, who took any protest of British, any protest of Americans as anti-constitutional. So राजा की भी गलती है और वहाँ के प्राइम मिनिस्टर्स एंड लेजिस्लेचर की भी गलती है. सब गलतियां मिलके हुआ है. So at least we have some fodder, some points, some idea. ठीक है. So we have stopped here. Nature and consequences हम कल देखेंगे. ठीक है. Let me see if we have any online doubts. No doubt. ठीक है. संपत, महबूब, अलंकृता, any doubt? No. ठीक है. चलो then. Let's take a break. We'll see you tomorrow.